Part 3, Himalayan Pilgrimage. Chapter 1. The Himalayas were calling, and I longed to answer. The next day I sat on the grimy concrete floor of a railway platform, waiting for the next third-class ride toward the north. I settled in to read the book Srila Prabhupada had given me, and was surprised to see that it had an introduction by George Harrison of the Beatles, who wrote, "Everybody is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. Krishna is God, the source of all that exists, the cause of all that is, was, or ever will be. As God is unlimited, He has many names: Allah, Buddha, Jehovah, Rama. All are Krishna, all are one." I had been studying world religions and felt I had so much more to learn. This ecumenical sentiment both pleased and surprised me, and I tucked the book into my bag for further examination in the future. At the station, I met a man in his 40s who was neatly dressed in white cotton pants and shirt, wore a white Nehru cap, and had a dark complexion with scars on his cheeks from a childhood bout with smallpox. His name was Madhava, and he worked as a supervisor for the railways. He persuaded me to join him on a trip to visit his guru. So from Bombay, we traveled a few hours east by bus to the holy site of Ganesh Puri. Upon arriving, he directed me. "Before meeting Guruji, you must be purified by bathing in the nearby hot sulfur springs." We approached 3 small ponds, simmering with dark, opaque water. Dozens of locals scrambled about, shouting to one another, while dozens more took their daily baths. Slowly, I submerged myself into smoking gray liquid that clung to my skin like oil, gradually adjusting to the burning heat and sour smell. Submerging myself up to the neck, the heat penetrated and revitalized my body and mind. Madhava then yelled out that I was now prepared to visit his guru. After I dressed, he led me to a small brick temple. Passing through the arched entrance, I found myself face to face with a large black and white photograph of a slightly heavy man with a shaved head who wore only a loincloth. He had a round face, prominent cheekbones, penetrating eyes, and white stubble covering his jaw. There Madhava informed me that this was his guru, Nityananda Baba, who had given up his mortal body 10 years before. Here in his sacred tomb or samadhi, his spirit could be felt with vibrancy more real than life. All around the samadhi, which was lit with oil lamps, perfumed with mogra incense, and decorated with yellow and orange marigolds, Nityananda Baba's followers sang God's names in unison. To my surprise, they were chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, the very one the river Ganges had revealed to me in the Himalayas, and which Srila Prabhupada had sung in Bombay. Chills ran through me. Nityananda Baba is worshipped by millions of followers in the states of Maharashtra and Karnataka. Madhava explained the details of his life, teachings, and miracles. In the latter part of the 19th century, while collecting wood in the jungle, a poor woman was attracted by the unusually loud cawing of crows in a densely wooded area. There she found an infant boy lying alone in the leaves. She entrusted the child to a barren woman who worked as a maidservant to a wealthy Brahmin. Even as a tiny boy, he was detached from the world, leaving his adoptive family at the age of 10 to become a spiritual renunciate. Nityananda Baba traveled far and wide by foot, always eager to serve those in need and enlighten the hearts of whomever he met. In his later years, he had settled here at Ganesh Puri. While meditating at his samadhi, the chant in the background, I felt the overpowering presence of Nityananda Baba, as if to assure me that his blessings were upon me. Several days later, I was led to a disciple of Nityananda Baba, who was building an ashram nearby. Small but rapidly growing, the hall of worship was located just off the roadside. As the door opened, the mantra to Shiva, Om Namah Shivaya, reverberated in a slow hypnotic chant. Inside, a couple dozen disciples, both from India and the West, were chanting in unison. String drones, called tamburas, made from hollow gourds, vibrated intensely. As the chanting faded into silence, everyone spilled out into a courtyard. I watched and waited. Then, as his disciples bowed down, their guru entered. He was 63 years old, with dark complexion, deep brown eyes, short, untrimmed hair and beard, and clothed in saffron robes. In his presence, his followers lit up with joy. I asked who he was. Swami Muktananda, I was told. Peering at me through his spectacles, the Swami addressed us through a translator. When I was 15, he began, I renounced my wealthy home for the life of a sadhu. I wandered to every holy place and at last met my Gurudev, Nityananda Baba. Smashing his right fist into his left palm, he exclaimed, Baba crushed my pride like no one else could do. Here he was describing the very thing I had been wondering and worrying about, which path or guru to choose and why. The audience, myself included, clung to his every word. He continued, Shaktipat initiation awakens the cosmic energy called Kundalini from the base of the spine. The Kundalini rises up the spine through the 7 energy chakras to the top of the head, where it merges into the Supreme. The surest means of awakening the Kundalini, Swami Muktananda said, is when a Siddha Guru, a perfected teacher, gives a mantra and transmits his or her Shakti directly to a disciple. He concluded, become addicted to your mantra even more than an alcoholic toward his liquor. Never forget it. On one occasion, as I stood with Swami Muktananda on the roadside, a vicious dog, howling insanely, bearing its threatening fangs, came charging toward us. People shrieked and scattered. With a mere stare, Swami tamed the creature, and it meekly bowed its head. Blessing the dog, he turned to me and spoke through a translator. I have noted you to be a sincere sadhu. If you wish, I will initiate you into Shaktipat. Images of Tatwala Baba, the Naga Guru, and others who extended themselves in this way flashed through my mind. "Thank you, Swamiji," I replied, both startled and honored. But I vowed not to accept formal initiation from a guru until I'm convinced I will never leave his shelter. Nervously, I petted the dog. How part of me wished I could easily accept his generous offer. I continued, "I don't deserve your kindness, but I haven't made that decision." "I appreciate your sincerity," he said, gazing into my eyes. "God will guide you." Then, like a confirmation to his blessing, the once vicious dog licked my hand again and again. Madhava insisted that I travel to Goa, where the climate, he said, would be excellent for my health. He even offered to buy me a ticket by ship. It seemed like the arrangement of destiny, so I accompanied him to the docks in Bombay and boarded a crowded boat that carried me 250 miles south along the coast of the Arabian Sea. After plying smoothly for the better part of a day, I reached my destination, a tropical paradise with endless beaches of soft sand and balmy air scented with sea salt. Starting in the 16th century, Goa had been the headquarters of Portugal's Asian Empire. At that time, Saint Francis Xavier, a Jesuit priest, converted tens of thousands of locals to Christianity. In 1961, Indian troops invaded Goa, defeating the Portuguese forces. Arriving at the beachfront, I saw stretches of white sands, crystal seas, and scores of coconut trees. To pass the time, I traveled to Kalangut Beach, a haven for Westerners who rented inexpensive houses there. Walking the beach, I passed men and women kissing and groping each other, heard rock and roll blaring, and saw drugs openly consumed. It was the same old scene I had left behind in Europe, but it now seemed so alien, like something from a past life. Uninterested, I walked through the sand along the sea. I caught myself mentally criticizing them as if I were superior. I didn't want these thoughts, which exposed my own arrogance. I prayed to be purified from my own pollution of fault-finding. But it was so hard. Living with the animals in the jungles was so much easier as they didn't so thoroughly expose my own shortcomings. About a kilometer farther, I came upon drug addicts, all from the West, scattered along the seashore, sticking needles in their arms. They had come so far to one of the most beautiful places on earth, only to suffer the miseries of addiction. Quickening my pace, I arrived at a small mountain at the end of the beach. I climbed over its boulders, panting in exhaustion, until I reached the other side. There, a tropical paradise lay before me. The plush white sands of the beach extended hundreds of yards. Groves of coconut trees swayed in the wind, and not a single human being could be seen. This would be my home for the next week. For 7 days I sat under a coconut tree, absorbed in study, meditation, and prayer. With the exception of a few poor fishermen rowing their boats into the sea each morning, The place was deserted. For my daily meal, I climbed a sloping coconut tree, shook down a fruit, and to open it, repeatedly smashed it against a rock. For my daily hygiene, I bathed in the sea, and for my bed, I stretched out on the sand under the starry sky. One day, I took a walk inland. There, nestled in countless coconut trees, I found a few scattered huts made of mud and dry coconut leaves, all built on the sand. The inhabitants, most of whom had converted to Christianity, followed the tradition of their ancestors as fishermen with no assets but a rowboat, 2 oars, and a net. From sunrise to sunset, the men labored in the sea under the burning sun, which blotched many of their faces with what looked like skin cancer. But hard work left them no time to dwell on such details. I thought how Jesus had made his first disciples from among fishermen, and then ordered them to be the fishers of men. On another day, as I was walking along the coastline, I found a tiny fish flapping desperately in the sand. A wave had washed it ashore. The fish's fear and desperation evoked my sympathy. He and I were not so different after all, and I resolved to return him to his home in the sea. But each time I picked him up, he frantically flapped right out of my hand. So fearful, he couldn't recognize me as a friend. Finally, I trapped him in my cupped hands and hurled him back into the water. Still, my sense of satisfaction was short-lived. The next wave washed him onto the shore, then receded back into the sea, leaving the same little fish once again flapping in the sand. Again I cast him into the water, and again the next wave left him in the sand to die. The next time, with much difficulty, I held him inside my cupped palms, tread into the ocean up to my neck, then hurled him as far as I could. I returned to the shore and observed wave after wave washing in and out until I was satisfied that the little fish was safe. Walking some distance, I came upon a group of fishermen dragging a net from their boat onto the sand. The net was filled with hundreds of such little fish, flapping for life and doomed to the frying pan. What could I do? I stared soberly into the sea and walked by, immersed in thought. I thought, we are all like fish that have separated from the sea of divine consciousness. For a person to be happy outside his or her natural relation with God is like a fish trying to enjoy life outside of the water, on the dry sand. Holy people go to great extremes to help even one person to return to his or her natural spiritual consciousness, to the sea of true joy. But the net of Maya, or illusion, snatches away the minds of the masses, diverting us from our true self-interest. When I first set out on my spiritual journey, my idea had been to learn as much as possible from various paths and teachers, and then take from each path the practice that was most effective for me. This was a popular idea in the 1960s, but in India, I began to realize the superficiality of it. I had seen many spiritualists with this idea, but the depth of their realizations seemed vague. Those who impressed me as advanced had committed themselves to a particular path. I had come to understand that my traveling from place to place and teacher to teacher had its limitations. Part of my hesitation to accept initiation into one religion, I realized, had to do with a fear of division from others. Still, I knew I would need to choose in order to progress. Not doing so was becoming painful. But which path and which teacher were mine? How would I ever know for sure? I pondered. Already, many great teachers have enlightened me with knowledge of different paths and experiences I didn't deserve. I see spiritual beauty in all of them. Which direction should I go at this crossroads in my life? That night, I prayed for guidance and drifted into sleep. In the middle of the night, I awoke to a crescent moon that shone in the dark sky. Within the embrace of this crescent, a single star sparkled. It was the symbol of Islam, a sign of submission to God. I stared in wonder. My heart reassured. I accepted this as a sign that the mystery I had been contemplating would be revealed to me in due time. Chapter 2. From Goa, I sailed back to Bombay and began my return journey to the Himalayas. I traveled by train to Delhi and then northwest to the town of Pathankot, near the border of Jammu and Kashmir state. From there, I journeyed east on the back of a truck to the Himalayan town of Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. Summer was approaching, and the forest was bursting with blooming flowers of orange, yellow, violet, and white. Huge ancient trees were cloaked in shining green leaves, and a constant buzz of wildlife energized the atmosphere. High on a mountain ridge above Dharamshala reigned McLeod Ganj, a Tibetan refugee camp and the home of the Dalai Lama of Tibet. In preparation for my pilgrimage to his mountaintop monastery, I read a book he had written entitled My Land and My People. I learned that Lama Dondrup was born in 1935 in a simple Tibetan house made of stone and mud to a family of poor farmers. A search party of exalted monks was directed to this house by the regent of Tibet, who had a vision revealing that this was the place where the next Dalai Lama had been born. When the child was only 2, they came to the house in the guise of travelers seeking refuge. Around one monk's neck hung the beads of the previous Dalai Lama, which the child grabbed, claiming them to be his own. After several visits and consequent tests, the committee concluded it had found the 14th incarnation of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who was believed to guide the Tibetan people spiritually and politically by reincarnating in each generation as the Dalai Lama. The boy was conveyed to the monastery in Lhasa, where he was groomed to be the head of state and spiritual leader of a nation. During the childhood years of his reign, Tibet flourished. But in 1950, the Chinese military invaded, and by 1959, the nation was torn by bitter agitation and violence. On the insistence of his people, who feared for his life, he had to flee from his beloved homeland. The Dalai Lama prayed in the temple of Lord Buddha and offered a shawl of white silk at the altar as a symbol of farewell with the intent to return. With a heavy heart, he shed his monk robes, and in the guise of a soldier, he escaped the palace in the dark of night. Through heavy snow, torrential rains, and bitter cold, he and his party trekked across the rugged mountains of Tibet like fugitives. All the while, his heart was breaking at the plight of his people, struck by disease, exhaustion, and what he referred to as unhappiness deeper than I can express. He crossed the border into India. Gripped by this amazing story of exile, fate, and overcoming hardship, I was compelled to see the place where the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism had made his new home. By the time I arrived in 1971, McLeod nestled in the high forested mountains and steep valleys of the Himalayas, looked like a little Tibet. The refugees dressed in their traditional clothes and constructed wooden or brick buildings in the Tibetan style of architecture, with dragons and other mythical beings carved or painted in rich colors onto their pillars and arches. Yaks grazed on the hillsides, and a few scattered Western pilgrims found secluded places to meditate. Just as in Tibet, many of the men were Buddhist monks. In the center of the village, the faithful circumambulated a large rectangular area surrounded by prayer wheels, all the while spinning the wheels and chanting the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. I knew from my reading that the Tibetan Buddhists believed this mantra invoked the blessings of Chenrezig, the embodiment of compassion, and that all the teachings of Buddha were contained within it. The people in McLeod were incredibly friendly. Glowing with smiles, they welcomed me wherever I went. Despite the hardships they had endured, and despite being refugees in a foreign land, they seemed at peace. I saw no beggars or cheaters among them. Everyone looked content. One family welcomed me into their small home and served me a Tibetan noodle soup called tupka, and traditional tea made with yak's butter and salt. The tea was especially effective at keeping a person warm during the cold Himalayan nights. My heart was so charmed by the people here that I often spent hours just watching them perform their daily chores as they grinned at me from ear to ear. Not far from the Dalai Lama's house stood the temple of a magnificent deity of the Buddha sitting in the lotus posture. Both the monks and the common people worship this golden form of the Buddha by offering incense, bells, lamps, and gifts. The puja, or worship ceremony, fascinated me. The monks sat in two lines facing one another with the Buddha in the center. They read from scriptures inscribed on sheaves of unbound parchment leaves. Each leaf was placed on top of the previous as they recited ancient prayers in unison. At auspicious intervals, some monks blew long trumpet-like horns, others rang ritualistic bells, and others struck large gongs with wooden mallets and beat upon drums with sticks. As the vibration reached its crescendo, a high priest ceremoniously raised a scepter crafted of intricately molded brass. This dorje was the transceiver of spiritual energy. Decorating the walls of the temples was artwork called tantras, painted in vibrant colors, designed to aid enlightenment by depicting history and symbolism of Buddhism. The fragrance of burning oil lamps and sweet incense further lifted my mind as I sat with the monks, meditating and chanting mantras. I was particularly struck by the love and honor the people held for their Dalai Lama. For the Tibetans, he had the spiritual power of a pope and the political authority of a king. His photograph was prominently displayed in every shop and home. One early morning, while I was meditating in the temple, a tall elderly lama with a shaved head, maroon robes, and a strand of wooden beads draped around his neck sat beside me. He said that he had been observing me for days and asked if I would like to ask any questions. We spent a couple hours each day together. On one very special afternoon, he invited me to join him for a personal audience with the Dalai Lama. The home of the Dalai Lama rested on a wooded hill, surrounded by armed Indian military guards, who, because he was under constant threat of death, were stationed for his protection. Passing through the security, I was ushered into a room where brightly colored paintings of Buddha and great bodhisattvas decorated the walls. A beautiful metal deity of Buddha sat on an altar decorated with flowers, brass lamps, bells, and other items of worship. Cedar-scented incense perfumed the air. Minutes later, a door opened, and the Dalai Lama glanced toward me, eyes sparkling with joy behind his brown-rimmed glasses. His large head was shaven, and he had a square face, low rounded nose, and draped a maroon robe over a bright golden monk's shirt. Beaming a contagious smile, he sprinted across the room to greet me. Laughing aloud, he tightly gripped both of my hands and shook them again and again. His eyes twinkled with glee as he spoke in a hearty voice. "You have come from far away. I welcome you." We sat on two chairs across from one another. With a childlike curiosity, he asked me about my life in America and why I had chosen the life of a sadhu. As I told my story, he listened to every word with rapt attention and concern. Wherever there was a trace of humor in my tale, his whole body shook with laughter, and he clapped his hands together. We spoke for perhaps a half hour, when I asked him about the condition of his people in Tibet. A wave of introspection then swept across his face, and tears welled in his eyes. In the silence that now surrounded us, he whispered, When I was a boy, my nation enjoyed freedom. We were a happy and united people, and our spirituality was flourishing. He paused for a long moment. In sober silence, he lifted a teapot to offer me a cup of Tibetan tea. I watched as the streaming tea poured from the spout into my cup. The Dalai Lama then returned the teapot to its place and lowered his head in deep thought, as if looking with his mind's eye and feeling in his heart the strife of his people across the Himalayan peaks in Tibet. He added tenderly, "We owe a great debt to India for providing shelter to thousands of our people. The universal quality of religion," he went on, "is compassion to other living beings. To sacrifice for the good of others is true Dharma." Seeing the immense sacrifice he extended for his people, his words struck my heart. "Meditation, study, and worship," he said, "give us the inner strength to live as kind and enlightened beings." His message invoked introspection, and his personality inspired reverence. But his affection had made me feel to be his intimate friend. Smiling, the Dalai Lama graciously placed around my neck a white silken shawl embroidered with Tibetan mantras. "It is a tradition to offer this gift to all my special guests," he said. I felt undeserving of his time and kindness, and bowed my head with gratitude. In his company, the virtue of selfless service was becoming more prominent in my mind. He was a person dedicated not only to his spiritual principles, but also to taking on the massive burden of serving the needs of his people, who were either in exile or under subjugation. He had endured incomprehensible challenges and obstacles in his apparently hopeless struggle. Tolerating exile and threats, he served his people. In my mind, this is what the shawl represented. It was a special gift. On a forested mountainside, I took up residence in a cave that overlooked a steep valley. There I survived on a food called tsampa, a dry powder made of roasted barley. When water was added, it becomes like a porridge. Tibetan monks taught me how to survive on tsampa, as it does not spoil. Having thus simplified my bodily needs, each day I was able to come down to McLeodganj to learn from the people there. Nights I returned to my cave. One night as I lay on the rock floor, a gigantic spider crawled along the wall just inches from my face. It moved its hairy black body slowly, lifting one leg at a time, until it disappeared into a hole about 6 inches from my face. As a small child, I had been terrified of spiders. Any time one entered our house, I would run away from it, crying for my mother to remove it. This cave-dwelling spider was the most ferocious I had ever seen. I thought, this is a test from God. I must overcome this fear. From that night on, the two of us respectfully shared the cave. From where I meditated, I noticed cobras occasionally slithering about in the forest. At times, I had other roommates as well. One night, a huge scorpion fell from the ceiling, inches from me. It wagged its deadly stinger from side to side. At that moment, my only candle burned its last, and the cave became pitch black. I felt it unwise to move, and so sat motionless in the darkness for a long time. In this state, I recalled fatherly Kailash Baba and how he taught me the proper consciousness around snakes and scorpions. Breathing slowly, I prayed to God to help me overcome judgment, hatred, and fear. One morning in my cave, my mind drifted across continents and seas to my father in the Chicago suburb of Highland Park. Unsure about my own direction, I was nonetheless feeling that the greatest act of love I could offer him was to write a letter encouraging him to come closer to God in the way that would be most natural for him. With the conviction of a youth, not yet knowing my own path, I wrote, "My beloved Father, I would like to ask something very dear of you. Much of the compassion that you have is reflected from my beloved Grandpa Bill. I believe that the root of his compassion was his all-embracing faith in the Hebrew religion. Grandpa implanted within you the seed of love for Judaism. Please nourish this seed with all sincerity to attain the inspiration of your faith and love for God. I feel that the sacred gift of meditation will give you great insight to reach the depths of Judaism. Hebrew, as well as the other great religions, can bring us all closer to the Lord. Please carry on the inspiration of your father and forefathers. I believe this is what you truly want. Richard, McLeodganj, Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh, India, May 1971. For the most part of my quest throughout India, I had had no companion with whom I could reveal my heart. My associates either spoke no English or were great, powerful sages far senior to me in age. At times, I was lonely, but I learned to relish loneliness as a way to cultivate my connection to God. Silent prayer became the medium through which I could pour out my thoughts and feelings. The serenity of meditation was my shelter from the restlessness of my mind and the world around me. While reassuring my family about my welfare, I was often impelled to use these letters to open my heart, even to recipients who might find my words difficult to comprehend. Sometimes, too, I would reveal my heart onto a small writing pad. One sunny day, while sitting alone in the solitude of my mountain cave, I wrote the following to no one. In the mind of a hermit, in troubled times, when a man is tired and weary, confused as to where he is going and what he has left to fall behind, he doesn't know whether to cling to or let go forever of those things that still remain with him. Where to go for one who has forsaken friend and home? What to do for one who wanders alone in the wilderness of his own solitude? Should he break the walls that he has constructed around himself, or should he build them stronger and higher? He pleads, "O Lord, is there a guide who can show me the way to you? Where shall such a homeless man reside who believes that home is not in this mortal world?" A reclusive mystic from Egypt lived a short distance from my cave. From time to time, we shared soul-searching talks. He had a dark, smooth complexion, large nose, thin lips, and an untrimmed goatee. His black, introspective eyes were so intense they glazed over as if looking into another world. Outwardly calm, his mind was always working to find another missing piece of wisdom in the puzzle of life. An Egyptian master of the oracle, a tarot-like science sometimes referred to as the Metu Netar, he offered one night to read my destiny. I agreed. Shuffling the deck and lining the cards into precise rows on a powder blue cloth in front of him, he commenced to enact a series of occult rituals from ancient Egypt. Then he guided me through an elaborate meditation that culminated in my selecting a card. Each brightly colored card was about 6 inches tall, 3 inches wide, and illustrated with mystical symbols and mythical figures. For a good half hour, he concentrated on the configuration before he finally broke the silence. He slowly rose from his chair, put both hands on the table, and delivered his prophecy. Neither your mind nor intelligence has the power to discern the spiritual path you long to know. Very soon, however, the divine power will direct you. Like a leaf in the wind, you will be led to the path you must follow. It was as if the cards knew everything about me, and he was their mouthpiece. Placing his finger on a particular card, he fell silent. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You must persevere with patience. By a power beyond your own, you will recognize the very one you seek. Believe in this. It is your destiny. Your master will come to you." Chapter 3. I bade farewell to the haven of peace at McLeod-Ganj. I would never forget the joy and kindness I received there. But I felt driven to experience more of the holy places of India, to expose myself to even more practices and traditions in hopes that my destiny would indeed reveal itself. From Pathankot, I took the train south into the state of Haryana, disembarking in Kurukshetra, the place where the Bhagavad Gita was first spoken and one of the holiest places in India. As I left the station, lugging my bag of spiritual books, I could hear from a nearby temple the Sanskrit verses of the Bhagavad Gita being recited through a crackling speaker. Here I immersed myself in reading the words Krishna spoke to his disciple Arjuna, who was about to shrink from his calling in the face of insurmountable obstacles. The Gita had been spoken on a battlefield, because life itself is a battlefield, where evil perpetually attacks good and our sacred ideals are destined to be tested. We would all be confronted by grave dangers and fearsome demons within and without. There was much to be gained from facing these aggressors with integrity and faith. Krishna's timeless call culminated in the practice of selfless devotion, determination, and spiritual absorption as the means to access a power beyond our own to overcome all fear. The power of God's love. In that sanctified place, the Bhagavad Gita's message penetrated me so deeply that I felt as if Krishna were personally speaking to me on each page. I read several chapters every day, poring over my little Gita press copy of the Bhagavad Gita, which was printed on cheap paper and bound in a white cardboard cover. I had read many spiritual texts in my travels, but none struck me as so highly practical. Reading the Bhagavad Gita under the very banyan tree where Krishna originally spoke to Arjuna, I was struck by how powerfully it revealed the science of self-realization beyond sectarian or historical boundaries. It elucidated such intricacies as how the soul is related to God, how that changeless soul is affected by material nature, how karma, the law of action and reaction, affects all of us, and how the imperceptible influence of time acts on creation. As a lonesome wanderer seeking truth, where danger, temptation, and fear could pounce on me at any moment, I found solace and direction in these immortal words. In Kurukshetra, the Bhagavad Gita became my handbook on how to live. After a few days, I left Haryana, and while I was traveling on a train winding through the Indian plains, I stopped for some time at a station. There I witnessed an ugly event. I saw a teenager being slandered and beaten by his employer on the platform. The teenager neither raised a finger nor said a word and was quickly dragged away. I asked a nearby college student what was happening. Shaking his head, he replied, "Because he was born in a lower caste, he's like a slave. Likely he will not be given opportunities for a proper education or to marry anyone outside his suppressed caste, and he will work slave labor for life. I know, I'm from a similar background, but I'm lucky. The government is fighting against these injustices, and most educated, cultured, or socially minded people are battling against it as well. But still, it is quite deeply ingrained in the minds of many." He explained to me that this caste system was actually a gross perversion of an ancient spiritual teaching, the Vedic Varnashram, which teaches that just as the human body has a head, arms, belly, and legs, and each limb is meant to perform its function for the benefit of the whole body, in the social body, one is taught to accept responsibilities for the social and spiritual benefit of oneself as well as everyone in society, according to one's natural inclinations and skills. The Vedic Varnashram was meant to encourage, empower, and unify everyone. However, he concluded, this concoction of caste by birth and exploitation of the lower castes has corrupted a beautiful system. My thoughts travel back to the suppression of racial and religious minorities in America and Europe. And I reflected sadly on how the tendency to cultivate superiority and exploit others takes many guises, expressing itself in society, politics, philosophy, or even religion. It was becoming increasingly clear to me that I needed to follow a particular path if I wanted to truly know God. But I worried that such a choice could lead me to narrow-mindedness. Attracted as I was to one of the most important religions in India, it heartened me that nothing in the true Hindu philosophy supported suppression of human beings on the basis of one's race, caste, sex, or birth, and that among saintly people I had not witnessed any of this kind of prejudice. In the beautiful Kulu Valley, in the state of Himachal Pradesh, I wandered through miles of pristine nature. I felt so close to God in natural settings. 2 days before, upon seeing a single photo poster plastered on a railway station wall, I jumped on a truck to Kulu. One day, while drinking in the fresh pine scent of the Himalayan air, I came upon a traveler from Colorado, whom I had met previously in Iran. Back then, he had been on his way to India to study Tibetan Buddhism. "How has your quest gone?" I inquired. Entering into a trance-like state, his eyes rolled upward. "God has incarnated." His eyelids fluttered and his voice quivered. I was blinded by the divine light, by the mere touch of his finger. Rushes of ecstasy thrilled my limbs. Divine music filled my ears. I smelled ambrosia and tasted nectar. "You must go immediately. The Lord of the universe has descended to earth." Like a doctor giving medicine to a dying patient, he insisted, "The culmination of your long journey to India is waiting in Haridwar. Go now, brother, do not delay. The Supreme Lord will soon travel abroad." Intrigued, I journeyed south to the ashram in Haridwar. Entering the temple, I was puzzled by a large photo on an altar. It was the young guru, wearing a crown and peacock feather, playing a flute and standing in the pose of Krishna. But he looked very different from the painting of Krishna I had purchased in Delhi. As my friend from Colorado had done, his disciples approached me and swooned. "The merciful Lord has come in the past as Rama and Krishna. Now he has come again. When Guru Maharaji bestows the knowledge, he opens your divine eye, and you will know him as the Lord of the universe." As Guru Maharaji would soon be leaving for his first trip abroad, the disciples hurried me onto a bus to New Delhi. Back in New Delhi, hundreds of Guru Maharaji's disciples crowded the ashram grounds, waiting to get a glimpse of him. I sat in a corner and watched. An elderly disciple struck up a conversation with me and then introduced me to a group of Mahatmas, a title for those empowered to bestow Guru Maharaj's knowledge. The Mahatmas decided that I must meet Sri Mataji, the Holy Mother of their Lord. She sat on a cushion, surrounded by admirers who whisked her with yak-tail fans and listened to her every word. To my surprise, she decided that I must have a private audience with her son before he departed, so a Mahatma escorted me to his room. Guru Maharaji was a boy of only 13 years old, slightly pudgy, with hair neatly parted on the side. He introduced himself as Prem Rawat and explained that he was the successor of his father, Sri Hamsji Maharaj. From amid the bustle of disciples, Guru Maharaji brought me to a rooftop for a private meeting. There, away from the crowd, we paced together back and forth while he asked many questions about my life and described his forthcoming trip, his first abroad. When he asked if I desired to take initiation into the knowledge, I explained to him, as I had to previous teachers, that I was careful about making such a commitment. As we conversed on the rooftop, the crowds below anxiously awaited him. Just then, a Mahatma poked his head onto the roof and announced that the time had come to leave for the airport. Guru Maharaji quickened his step. "I must go. If ever you decide to receive the knowledge," he said, "you may come to me personally in India, America, or London." With thousands looking on, we came down the stairs. I stepped to the sidelines as Guru Maharaji, with much fanfare, blessed his flock and departed by car. Watching from the background, I was grateful for his attention and believed he could be an accomplished yogi, perhaps from his past life. But when I looked inside myself, there was no inclination to accept him as Krishna, the Supreme Lord of the universe. Who God is, I thought, is a serious subject, not to be taken lightly. During the course of my travels, I had become quite attached to the spiritual books I carried. I had gradually gathered a small library in a cloth bag. Except for this heavy bag of books, my only possession was a begging bowl and a branch used as a walking stick. Many times I considered reducing the weight of this burden, but every time I looked through the books, trying to decide which ones to give away, I found I could not part with a single one. Among them were the Bhagavad Gita, Bible, Upanishads, Autobiography of a Yogi, books on Buddhism, one by Shankaracharya, and the Krishna book, personally given by Srila Prabhupada. Because each was special to me, and I worried I might never find it again, I lugged this bag of books wherever I went, often exhausted from the load. Now, near Connaught Circus in New Delhi, I set the books down on a street corner. Auto rickshaws zoomed by, spewing trails of black diesel smoke. Cars jammed the street, each trying to squeeze ahead of the other. Bicycle rickshaws, hand carts, and ox-driven bullocks moseyed by, while battered trucks blared their horns and blasted out clouds of carbon monoxide. Amid it all, I waited for the traffic light to turn green. Suddenly, a man stormed at me, grabbed the back of my neck with a vice grip, and stuck a metal stick into the hole of my ear. He gouged me deeply, scratching away painfully. I shivered. Who is this man? What is he doing? Would he puncture my eardrum? He kept gouging, and I was totally under his control, afraid to move. Next, he released my neck, yanked the metal out from my ear, and held it up for me to see. Attached to his stick was a big lump of earwax. I was delighted, as I could hear better than I had in years, at least in one ear. He then demanded 1 rupee as the price to clean the other ear. But I had nothing. He bargained, but to no avail, leaving me with a dirty ear. I couldn't believe it. I had no idea how filthy my ear had been until I felt what it was like to have it clean, especially compared to the other one. With a rueful smile, I drew a parallel to the spiritual journey. Perhaps, I thought, the dirty wax of egotism accumulated in the heart prevents us from clearly hearing the Lord's voice within. A guru with the stick of knowledge cleans our hearts. It's really ugly to see what may come out. But by following patiently, we keep cleaning. Another lesson I took from this experience was this. Sometimes the Lord gives us a free sample of religious experience, but for more, we must pay a price with the currency of sincere dedication to the process of cleansing. My hearing was now like an unbalanced stereo system. I knew I had cleansing still to do on many levels. I waited on the street corner until the traffic light turned green. But when I reached down to lift up my bag of books, it was gone. I was frantic. I searched the 4 directions, running here and there, asking everybody around, but to no avail. I had to come to grips with the reality that my books had been stolen. Standing on that corner, I lamented. These precious books enlightened me with knowledge and inspiration. They were an irreplaceable treasure in my life. I received them from the benevolent hands of my teachers. My precious wealth has now been ripped away. Terribly sad, hopeless of their recovery, I walked away. After taking a few steps, I became aware of how easy it had become to walk. The heavy burden that had troubled me for so long, the bag of books, was gone. Just as suddenly as I had felt despair, I felt liberated. Almost skipping, I reflected. The nature of the mind is to interpret non-essentials essential. The mind creates artificial needs, believing it cannot live without them. In this way, we carry a great burden of attachments throughout our life. Attachment is itself a great burden on our minds. We may never understand the extent of the burden till, like my books or the earwax, we're free of it. But if we find joy within, we can live a simple life, free of endless complications. I had begun to develop an attachment to finding the right path and teacher by my own will. Paradoxically, I now understood that in order to truly find what I was seeking, I needed to be detached and sincere. Whatever obstacles I was to encounter along the way would serve, I hoped, to bring me the ultimate freedom. Chapter 4. Ayodhya, the birthplace of Lord Rama. It has been a place of pilgrimage for countless millions of devotees over millennia, and I wish to join them. Long ago, the all-beautiful Lord appeared here in the role of a man to teach the world by his own example. As a son, he graciously accepted exile, sacrificing his right to the throne, all to protect the honor of his father. As a husband, he loved and protected his wife Sita, to the extent of waging a war to protect her. As a student, he rendered menial services while eagerly learning from his teachers. As a friend, he showed tender love to all those who were in need. As a brother, his loyalty and love shone in the face of insurmountable temptations. And later, in the role of a king, Lord Rama treated every citizen without discrimination like his own sons and daughters. All of these attributes were meant to teach us the responsibilities we have in our relationships and to endear our hearts to love the Lord. Walking down a wide road lined with large temples and palaces, and seeing thousands of pilgrims swarming about, my first impression was that in coming to Ayodhya, I had entered into a royal kingdom. Each night I slept on the earthen bank of the river Sarayu. One morning, after my bath, I walked with great anticipation to the site of Lord Rama's birth. Little did I know I had stumbled onto one of the biggest sites of crisis in the world. Were my eyes deceiving me? A place of pilgrimage, worshipped by hundreds of millions, the sacred birthplace of Lord Rama, was marked with an abandoned mosque, enclosed by coils of barbed wire fencing and patrolled by soldiers armed with rifles, bayonets, and hand grenades. Outside the fence, about a dozen sadhus sat on a wooden platform, chanting the holy names of Lord Rama. Confused, I inquired into what was happening here, but none of the sadhus spoke English. Finally, someone gave me a pamphlet written in English. It explained that Janmabhoomi was Lord Rama's birthplace, and that long ago a magnificent Ram temple stood here. But a Mughal conqueror built a mosque in its place, and over the years Hindus and Muslims had battled over ownership of the land. Finally, to subdue the bloody Hindu-Muslim conflict, the government had seized control. The pamphlet read, "Today, guarded by heavily armed military, no one is allowed entrance into the area." The pamphlet concluded, "That is why these sadhus have vowed to loudly sing the holy names of Rama constantly until the Hindus are given access." Recalling similar tensions brewing in Jerusalem at the disputed Dome of the Rock, I faced the huge steel lock on the gate and reflected on worldwide politics and bloodshed. In my travels, looking for the love of God, I had discovered a unique beauty in all of the world's religions. But hateful aggression in the name of God is also a sad reality of this world. It is the way of those attached to external forms without understanding the essence. The essence is one, unconditional love of God. The symptoms of any true follower are faith, self-control, love, and compassion. Looking through the barbed wire, I saw a wooden table at the entrance of the abandoned mosque. On it was a painting of Lord Rama. A soldier in full military attire marched toward it, leather boots stomping the dusty ground. He had a rifle with an attached bayonet slung over his shoulder and bullets strapped across his chest. Bowing down in prayer, he carefully placed a garland of marigolds around the painting. Under the circumstances, he was the temple priest. I watched in wonder. It was in Ayodhya that I was given an English translation of the Ramayana, which I read daily on the bank of the Sarayu River. This ancient scripture recounts the life and teachings of Lord Rama. While I still had a tendency to meditate on the all-pervading, impersonal truth, I was slowly finding my heart irresistibly drawn to the personal qualities of the Lord. Reading about the loving exchanges between Rama and his devotees drew my mind closer to the path of devotion. He was such a wonderful role model, teaching us how to be a spiritual person, but also active in the world of family and society. At the time of my departure, I thanked holy Ayodhya and prayed that I would never forget the treasured gifts I received. My pilgrimage next led me southeast to Prayag, praised as the king of holy places. This was home of the Kumbh Mela, the largest gathering on earth, where up to 20 million pilgrims gather every 12 years to meet saintly people and take a religious purification bath. Prayag is situated at the confluence of 3 rivers, the Ganges, Yamuna, and Saraswati. 6 months earlier, I had declined invitations to come to Kumbh Mela in favor of staying alone by the Ganges in the Himalayas. But it had been a dream of mine to visit. Arriving on a sweltering summer morning, I asked the local man the way to the confluence. Pointing his finger, he directed me. When I reached the river Ganges, I sat on her sandy bank and thought back to those first days of my life in India. I remembered sitting on that rock in Rishikesh while Mother Ganges taught me lessons that were to mold my life. I remembered hearing in her eternal song the Hare Krishna mantra that would become embedded in my soul. Now, sitting on that sandy bank in Prayag, I knew that if I simply followed her current, I would come to her meeting with Yamuna and Saraswati at the confluence. It was this confluence that the Vedas declared to be the king of all holy places. I walked in that direction. It was high noon, and the fine white sands blazed like fire, scorching my bare feet. Ever since that day, I had offended the Naga Babas by wearing my shoes at their sacred fire. I had renounced shoes and walked barefoot. But that day, the The sun was so unbearably hot that it seemed impossible to continue. The distance seemed endless. Finally, after over an hour, a beautiful sight rose before my eyes. The river Yamuna descended from the Himalayas, having flowed through the plains of North India, was embracing Mother Ganges. Yamuna, with her complexion of deep blue, Ganges with hers of white, and the transparent Saraswati joined them from below. Sitting on the sandy bank, I gazed into the cloudless blue sky. There, a hawk, wings extended, soared the airways. His reddish-brown feathers shone in the sun as he hovered lower and lower, till he was just a few yards above my head, his glistening yellow eyes intently scanning the river. Suddenly he plunged headlong into the Ganges. There a frantic underwater skirmish ensued until he emerged with a flapping fish about a foot long, pierced in the grip of his talons. Squirming desperately, the fish was carried overhead into a nearby forest. Looking on, I reflected. The unsuspecting fish, who knew nothing but life in the river, went about its routine like any other day, but in an instant was ripped out of its reality to meet with death. Like that fish, we routinely live our lives hardly aware that at the least expected moment, the yellow-eyed hawk of fate, in the form of crisis, tragedy, or even death, may wrench us out of our comfortable environment. We regularly hear of it in the news or see it around us, but rarely take seriously that it could happen to us. Perhaps the lesson here is to guard against complacency and give higher priority to our spiritual needs. If the fish swam deeper, the hawk would not be able to reach it. Similarly, if we go deeper into our connection to God, we will find an inner reality so deep and so satisfying that it lifts the consciousness to a place where we could deal with the effects of unforeseeable fate with a stable, detached mind. On the bank of the three rivers, in the blazing summer heat, there was not a soul to be seen. So I left my few belongings on the riverbank and entered the water. After bathing, I was hit with a wave of enthusiasm to stay in as long as possible. After all, I didn't know if I would ever come to this magical place again. I ventured to swim across to the other side. It was about 100 yards wide. The flow of the Ganges was forceful, the Yamuna gentle. As I swam, the force of the Ganges swept me to a bank where there was nothing and no one to be seen. I pulled myself out of the water and stepped onto the sandy bank. To my horror, I found myself being swallowed, seized by a power that sucked me downward. Quicksand! It had appeared to be just like the soft sand I often slept on, but looks could be deceiving. Frantically, I struggled for my life, but in spite of my strongest endeavors, I sunk deeper and deeper. Already my body had been sucked down past my knees, and I was gradually sinking deeper. Mustering all my strength, I squirmed doggedly. In vain. Mother Earth was literally devouring me. I scanned all directions for help, but found nothing. And then, to my left, I caught sight of a leafless bush. With a desperate lunge, I grabbed onto it as my single hope for survival. It was a thorn bush. Gripping it tightly, I yanked with all my might, with bleeding hands, tugging and tugging on that thorny branch. I struggled to free my legs. Under the blazing sun, I squirmed for dear life. The razor-like thorns pierced my hands. My blood flowed from burning wounds. But what choice did I have? I could accept the agonizing pain or surrender to the sands and an ignoble and ghastly death. Gasping in fatigue and soaked in sweat, I would somehow pry one leg free, only to have it sucked down again. With my next tug, the thorn bush with its rotted roots sprung out from the sand. I silently screamed. Letting go of the useless branch and exhausted by my frenzy, I took a deep breath and relaxed. Amazingly, I discovered that if I was calm, the quicksand was less aggressive. I laid my torso flat on the sand and found that I could almost float in that position. It was not a solution, but it did give me some time. Inch by inch, in slow motion, I raised my legs. Finally, at a snail's pace, I wormed my way back into the river. I was free, or so I thought. Now all I had to do was swim across Yamuna's mild current. But that meant challenging the mighty current of the Ganges head on. No matter how hard I swam, Mother Ganges kept forcing me back toward the quicksand. Exhaustion was threatening to overtake me. I could no longer fight against the current. I toiled feverishly, but still I was moving backwards. My arms were fatigued, almost to the point of paralysis. Still, I strained to keep body and soul engaged in a battle I was not winning. My destination was so distant I could barely see it. Struggling for survival, I prayed. Suddenly, hope appeared. About 200 feet ahead, a small fishing boat passed. There on the deck stood a shriveled man with a white beard wearing a red turban. Still chopping against the current, I screamed out to him again and again for help. Will he hear me? I continued crying out for help as my strength faded. Finally, he spotted me. Smiling, he waved his hand in a forward direction. Then, still smiling, he glided right past me, leaving me to drown. Involuntarily swallowing more and more water, I now lost all hope. Even my hopes died. I thought, it is better to drown in a holy river than suffocate in that quicksand. The same Ganges who in Rishikesh had taught me so many precious lessons and nourished me as a mother, to whom I offered my egotism in the form of my harmonica, and whose song awakened my soul. To her I now offered my life. Prayer was the only thing I had left. Then something wonderful happened. Submerged underwater, on the verge of death, a beautiful song awakened in my heart. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just as the Ganges first revealed this mantra to me, she was revealing it again at the hour of my greatest need. Silently reciting this mantra, I resign myself to die in a holy place. The mantra brought me into a state of peace beyond fear. Then, like the rising sun, a thought appeared in my mind. I thought, why did that fisherman wave his hand forward? What did it mean? Suddenly, I understood. He was saying, do not fight against Mother Ganges. Go across her current by swimming with the current of the Yamuna. In my passion to survive, I'd not thought of that. That fisherman's wave saved my life. As I was carried across the Ganges, I was seized by worry once more. I had left my passport and whatever little I carried alone on the other side of the riverbank. Now I was swimming in the opposite direction. Would my things be there when I returned? And then it occurred to me, why brood over such a trifle? Moments before, death was threatening my life, and with only the passport of God's names, I crossed over and was saved. Hours later, when I made it back to the other shore where I had left my things, evening was beginning to fall, and hundreds of people were scrambling to take a bath. My belongings sat in their midst, unmolested. Surrounded by the noisy crowds, I sat on the sandy banks. I thought, in the morning, the sand scorched me like blazing fire, and later was greedy to devour me. But now the same sand is cool and soft and gives me shelter. Like sand, a person influenced by circumstances can become viciously envious or affectionately kind. Our company and surroundings have a crucial effect on our consciousness. How important it is to be an instrument to bring out the inherent good of each other rather than the worst. So much wisdom is being whispered through every grain of sand. If only I have the ears to hear. As the soft sand glided through my fingers, I pondered my life and death struggle in the current of Mother Ganges. An affectionate mother may at times deal harshly with her child to impress a lesson that will not be easily forgotten. What was I to learn from today's ordeal? Perhaps we cannot always succeed by directly opposing a powerful force. I thought of the many trials I had faced on my path. If we do, our efforts will drown in failure. It is like swimming against the Ganges current. In such circumstances, it might be more effective to find a path of less resistance to accomplish the desired end indirectly. The summer sun was fading below the horizon, and I recalled how earlier that day I witnessed a hawk rip an unsuspecting fish out of its home, the river. A little later, with no warning, the talons of fate had me gasping for dear life in the same river. Today, I reflected, the Lord has given me a startling glimpse of how far I am from my goal. It was not an easy lesson to learn, and hopefully it will not be easily forgotten. I took a deep breath and looked up into the sky. There, far above all the smaller winging birds, I saw a hawk, with the confidence of an emperor, gliding effortlessly. into the twilight. Chapter 5. The monsoon rains had come. Billowing clouds of purple, indigo, and midnight blue were streaked with repeated flashes of lightning. Bass rumbles of thunder resonated across the sky. Although traveling in monsoon season was hard, I inhaled the moist, warm air and was thrilled. July was approaching, and I wondered where to go for my next visa extension. There was a rumor that one could easily get an Indian visa in Nepal. Considering that it was not very far away, I decided to try. On my journey northeast toward Nepal, I arrived in Patna, a bustling city of huge granaries, colleges, and political buildings in the state of Bihar. I meandered to the river Ganges and slept on the river's bank at the collectory ghat, where Mother Ganges looked as wide as a sea and was awakened by the rays of the rising sun and the sound of hundreds of people singing songs while preparing to take their baths. I lay there, taking in this colorful display, when suddenly I sensed an overpowering presence. There, towering over me, was a marvelous-looking man with long white hair and beard. I felt to be face to face with a classical holy man of ancient lore. 3 vertical lines called tilak were drawn on his forehead. The center line was red and the other 2 white. Perhaps in his late 70s, he spoke no English, but pressing his hands together and bowing in greeting, gestured for me to follow him into his temple on the riverbank. Not bigger than a large hut, the gray stone temple looked very old. Its front was open to the river, and as he entered, I saw a man who appeared in his mid-80s, sitting before an altar, reciting prayers. He greeted me in fluent English. "My name is Narayan Prasad. I hail from Patna." He began to tell me his story. "Now that my children are grown, I am retired from government service and come here each day to serve my guru." Taking my hand, he led me to the same holy man who'd found me lying on the riverside. "This is my guru, Ram Sevak Swami. He is a great bhakti yogi." I knew by now that bhakti meant devotion, but I had no idea yet the depth or true meaning of this tradition. The Swami invited me to remain at his temple as long as I wished. He was to be the first sadhu who followed the path of bhakti yoga I would stay with. Like a loving father, he carefully considered my welfare. A gentle smile beamed from his aged face every time he looked at me. Although 4 times my age, he fed me with his own hands. Later, when I was ill, he prepared herbal medicines for me. He was a revered Swami, and I, a lost little soul, a Western kid struggling to find my way. My heart was moved seeing the devotion of Ram Sevak Swami. It was from him that I learned much about the behavior of an honest and genuine holy man. Simplicity and devotion poured from his heart in whatever he did. Each morning he spent several hours alone, chanting the names of Lord Rama on his wooden beads and performing his daily worship on the altar with great feeling. One day he explained to me the meaning of his name. Ram Sevak means one who serves Lord Rama, and the greatest service to Rama is to help others to know him and love him. He stroked his flowing white beard and became emotional. I am indebted to you for allowing me to help you, he said. Hearing this, even Narayan Prasad was overcome with emotion and had to struggle to speak the translation. As for me, I was only beginning to grasp the true meaning of devotion. At night, as we all slept on the jagged stone floor of the temple, swarms of bloodthirsty mosquitoes tormented me. I felt I was being eaten alive. Their buzzing agitated my ears. Zeroing in, they stabbed into my flesh and sucked my blood. It was impossible to sleep. In distress, I looked over at Ram Sevak Swami and a visiting sadhu. Even though mosquitoes swarmed around them and grew plump with their blood, they lay peacefully on the rocks, sleeping soundly. These two sadhus were completely oblivious to bodily suffering. I prayed to God that someday I might be so detached. One evening, a visiting sadhu offered to cook for us. After begging alms in town, he returned, and while crouching on the floor, he started a fire with the fuel of dried cow dung patties that heated a clay pot. He cooked khichdi, made of rice, mung, and some potatoes. His complexion was dark, his hair and beard matted, and he wore only a faded white loincloth. When he finished cooking, he offered the food first on the altar and then to us. I sat on the floor in a row with Ram Sevak Swami and 3 other sadhus. As our cook heaped a ladle full of khichdi on each plate, we chanted songs in praise of Lord Rama and prepared to eat. We ate with our fingers from a leaf plate. With the first bite, my mouth blazed. It was as if the cook had spiced the chili peppers with a little rice. I was sweating profusely. My nose ran, and tears streamed from my eyes. It felt like the remaining wax in my ears was melting. I despaired, for according to sadhu custom, one must complete everything on one's plate. At that moment, my only goal in life was to somehow finish my plate. The pain was excruciating, and I hiccuped uncontrollably. I ate mouthful after mouthful of that blistering dish in sheer anguish. The others were enjoying it so much they never could have dreamed of my suffering. Just as I managed to choke back the last of my portion and feel the promise of relief, our generous cook came around to give seconds. I blocked my plate with my hands. Puran, Puran, I am full, no more. He smiled with the ladle brimming over, ready to fill my plate. Tora, Tora, a little, Take just a little more." I felt as if I were standing before death personified, pleading for my life. "Puran, Puran!" My hands protectively covered my plate. "Tora, Tora!" With a gracious smile, he performed the fateful deed. He dropped the contents of the ladle on my plate. My mind reeling, I somehow completed the fiery food and breathed a sigh of relief. Just then, I saw him returning with thirds. I knew I couldn't survive another plate. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't. The etiquette among sadhus is that no one gets up until all others have completed. He dipped the ladle into the pot and filled it with what looked like a ladle full of chilies. Ever since I was a child, I had always felt bad when I caused other people sorrow. So intent was the cook on pleasing us that I didn't have the heart to reveal the pain that he was causing me. My pulse was racing. What could I do? In haste, I lifted my plate and crumpled it into my hands. He smiled and went on to the next sadhu. Amazed, I watched all the others thoroughly enjoying helping after helping. The cook pointed to me and bragged, "He likes my cooking so much, he is crying in gratitude." I forced a smile and nodded in agreement, while reflecting on the philosophy of selfless service that was so much a part of these men's lives. I thought, yes, I am crying, and it may as well be in gratitude as he believes. To please others is not always easy, but it is a part of my deepest nature to wish to do this. Enduring the burning pain of that food was a small price to please this sadhu. That night, the mosquitoes hardly bothered me. Perhaps my blood was too spicy. While in Patna, Narayan Prasad became a dear friend of mine. As it goes with friends, he was eager for me to meet a dear friend of his, a doctor who operated an X-ray clinic. One day the doctor welcomed us into his office and invited us to sit around his desk. Although born a Hindu, he was disillusioned by prejudice against lower castes, and largely for this reason, he converted to Islam. He was now a scholar of the Holy Quran and accepted the name Muhammad. He continued to accept the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, but did not want to be affiliated with a religion that discriminated against people on the basis of their birth. I challenged him, but the Gita doesn't discriminate on the basis of one's birth. Many of the greatest saints of the Hindus were born of lower castes. The Bhagavad Gita teaches we are not material bodies, but immortal souls. Together we discussed the true basis of religion, examining the parallels of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, and the Quran. We continued to meet thereafter, and without bias or prejudice, we enriched each other with dialogue. He didn't try to convert me to Islam, and I didn't try to convert him either. Rather, with mutual respect, we shared our realizations. In our dialogue, I could feel the mercy of God flowing through each of the great scriptures, saints, and religions in a special way. I was becoming more and more aware that no matter what one's path and no matter how narrow it became, in broadest terms, sincere devotion to God was the only way to overcome the strife and division of the world. Sitting on the bank of the Ganges one day, after a talk with Mohammed, I inquired of Narayan Prasad, "How is it that you have so much affection for someone from another religion in a country where there is so much conflict between the two?" With a warm smile, he said something I have never forgotten. "A dog will recognize his master in whatever way he dresses. The master may dress in robes, suit and tie, or stand naked, but the dog will always recognize his master. If we cannot recognize God, our beloved master, when he comes in a different dress from another religion, then we are less than that dog." As I had stayed longer with Ram Sevak Swami than I'd planned, I hiked to the Foreign Immigration Office in Patna to try for an extension. The office was nothing more than a small brick house with an old man behind a desk. There were hardly any filing cabinets. Most of the papers and records were piled high on the official's desk and floor. He searched through these piles for 15 minutes before he found the application form. After filling out the application, I handed over my passport. He studied it for a moment, then in a flat, bureaucratic tone said, "Your visa cannot be extended beyond the current expiration date." His words left me dumbstruck. To leave my adopted motherland would be unbearable. I pleaded with him again and again, but he stuck to his official response. It seemed hopeless. I prayed. At that moment I saw a painting of Lord Rama on the wall behind him. Meekly I addressed the man, "Sir, in the country I come from, everybody eats cows." His jaw dropped and eyes opened wide. "What? Killing our sacred cow? How horrible!" "Sir, in the country I am from, boys and girls often live together without marriage." He shook his head in disapproval and clicked his tongue. "Uncivilized!" "I shudder to tell you this, sir, but no one in my country has ever even heard the name of Rama." He could not believe his ears. Reaching across the desk, he grabbed my hands in his and said, "You must never go back to that horrible place." "But if you don't extend my visa, I must go back to that place. I came to India to seek shelter of your beloved Lord Rama." He pushed his chair back, jumped up, and declared, "I am Rama's devotee. It is my duty to protect you." With these words, he stamped a new visa on my passport. My passport. My passport. Each morning at Ram Sevak Swami's ashram, 5 sadhus would gather in the temple to read in Hindi from the Ramayana, the story of Lord Rama. I could understand only a few words here and there, but Narayan Prasad promised me that he would translate whatever was spoken after the session. For 3 hours, the sadhus sat in rapt attention as emotions flooded their hearts. Sometimes they shook in laughter. Other times they wept with joy or sorrow. Still at other times, they sat motionless in suspense, fear, and wonder. I was starving to hear the story that affected them so. When the discussion was complete, I begged Narayan Prasad, Please tell me everything." We strolled out of the temple and sat on the bank of the Ganges, where he began the narration. "One morning," he said, "when Lord Krishna was a small baby, his mother Yashoda fed him milk from her breast. As she was doing so, she noticed that a pot of milk on the stove was boiling over. So after putting baby Krishna in a safe place, she ran to save it. Krishna did not like being put aside like this. To show that no one should have priorities above service to God, he displayed his heart-enchanting quality of naughtiness by breaking a clay butter pot and eating the butter. Then, stirring up even more trouble, he entered another room where he climbed on top of a wooden grinding mortar. From this height, Krishna could reach up to steal more butter from a clay pot suspended from the ceiling by ropes. While eating, to his full satisfaction, he fed butter to the local monkeys. Meanwhile, Yashoda searched for her child. Following his buttery footprints, she spied him, feeding the monkeys while glancing fearfully from side to side. She smiled. As she tiptoed toward him, Krishna caught a glimpse of her and fled. Yashoda, overwhelmed by motherly love, chased after him, and Krishna, pleased to be conquered by his devotee's love, agreed to be captured. His little body trembled with thought of punishment. Tears fell from his eyes, pleas for mercy from his lips. He promised to not steal butter again. Because Mother Yashoda had household chores to do and wanted to protect her baby, she attempted to bind him around the waist with a silk rope to the grinding mortar. But the rope was 2 inches too short, so she tied more rope to the original. Still, it was 2 inches too short. Her friends, the gopis, or cowherd women, brought more and more rope. No matter what they tried, the rope was always 2 inches too short. Seeing his mother, smiling with uncontrollable affection and perspiring from her work with the rope, flowers falling from her hair, Krishna finally agreed to be bound by her love. In this pastime, Krishna shows us that although he is the supreme controller of all universes, he finds the greatest pleasure in being bound by the love of his devotees. To my surprise, I found myself overwhelmed with joy and begged Narayan Prasad, "Please tell me more." "That's all we spoke today," he replied simply. "But the talk was over 3 hours. Please say more." "That's all that was spoken." The next day, thrilled by the story about Krishna as a child and by the devotees' enrapt attention to the lecture, I was even more eager to hear. When the meeting ended, Narayan Prasad and I sat on the banks of the Ganges, and once again he told me the same story of Krishna stealing butter. He would tell me no more, no matter how much I begged. With a mischievous smile, he replied, "That is all that was spoken." On the third day, during the talk, the emotions of the sadhus were wonderfully vibrant with devotion. Sitting on the bank of Mother Ganges, I looked long and level at Narayan Prasad, my translator. "I must hear what was spoken today." He narrated the exact same story of Krishna stealing butter that he told before. Upset, I challenged him. Why are you doing this to me? Every day the talk goes on for 3 hours, but your story is only 10 minutes. Why do you deceive me?" But that's all that was spoken. Anger stirred in my breast. Today I listened carefully. Not once was the name Krishna or Yashoda spoken. Now please, please, tell me. He smiled and remained calm. We only discussed baby Krishna stealing butter. Tears filled my eyes. Am I so unworthy that I am not permitted to hear? Seeing my distress, Narayan Prasad became sober. He gazed deeply into my eyes. Seeing your sincere tears, I will now tell you the reason. He paused for several minutes, then broke the silence. The first night that you came here, Ram Sevak Swami had a dream. Lord Rama appeared to him and spoke these words. This young boy is a devotee of Krishna, but he does not know it yet. You must not speak anything to him except the glories of Krishna. Vrindavan will be his place of worship. He will not believe you if you tell him this, but someday he will understand. The Ganges flowed forcefully as Narayan Prasad put his hand on my shoulder. Tears welled in his eyes as he tried to pacify me. My guru, Ram Sevak Swami, gave me an order. I am not to speak to you about anyone except Krishna. But all my life I've been a devotee of Rama. And although both Rama and Krishna are the same one supreme person who appeared in different forms at different times, the only story I properly know about Krishna is his stealing butter. He reached into his bag and pulled out a print of baby Krishna stealing butter and gave it to me. It charmed my heart. Still, I was unable to grasp what he said. Was I to worship Krishna and in a place called Vrindavan? Because I could not understand it, I dismissed the idea out of hand. All I knew then was that I aimed to return to the caves of the Himalayas. I had stayed several weeks at Ram Sevak Swami's ashram, enchanted by his gentle manner and that of his followers. The day I was leaving, I bowed down to seek the Swami's blessings. He wanted to give me a gift, but what did he have to offer? Looking around, he noticed his own walking stick, and with a tearful smile, presented it to me. I was overcome with gratitude. Although it was nothing but a crude branch broken from a tree, it was a gift of love that meant more to me than all the fortune in the world. I accepted his sacred gift, and my eagerness to do so brought him joy. He spoke in a voice cracking with affection as Narayan Prasad translated. The scripture tells us that the stick of a devotee's mercy can save one from the greatest dangers. The stick was to become my constant companion. Chapter 6. Suppressing my occasional fears of what might lie before me, I pressed on. I felt that something special was waiting for me in Nepal. From Patna, I traveled by train to Raxaul, a town near the border between India and Nepal. A truck driver, his hair and clothes soiled by the dusty roads, smiled through teeth stained red from chewing spices. With a wave of his hand, he welcomed me to climb onto the cargo trailer. I found a place among the other passengers, mountain women, dressed in long faded dresses with scarves wrapped over their gray hair, and farmers in faded cloth, traveling with their bleating goats and cackling chickens, and sat atop one of the many burlap grain bags piled up under our feet. We jostled along, ascending ever higher up the bumpy road. The cargo area had no roof and was overloaded as much as humanly possible, so much so that we rode higher than the truck's cab. Although the conveyance was neither comfortable nor safe, there could be no better panoramic view of the Himalayas. As we climbed to greater elevations, verdant mountains and valleys stretched in all directions. Snow-clad peaks presided over the horizons and at times soared above us. My lungs feasted on the fresh mountain air, and my flesh thrilled to the touch of the crisp breeze. No one seemed to mind being lashed periodically by monsoon storms. Hours later, in the middle of the night, the truck dropped us off just outside of Kathmandu. Exhausted and hungry, I continued on my way alone through the damp, black night. Dilapidated wooden houses loomed on either side of the deserted street. But something else seized my attention. From a distance, I could hear the mad howling of dogs. With growing apprehension, I began to recollect warnings I'd been given from wandering sadhus about the wild dogs. How by night they roamed in crazed packs. How the pack would ensnare their prey in an ever-tightening circle, ferociously attack and rip their victim limb from limb. How they would then devour the corpse on the spot. Almost as soon as I'd had that thought, an outcast dog, foaming at the mouth, spotted me alone on the deserted street. He flung his head back and pierced the sky with a howl. Seconds later, a pack of snarling dogs charged toward me. Were there 6 or 8? I was too shaken to count, but I did grasp the significance of the foamy white venom dripping from their snapping mouths. These beasts were rabid. Eyes bulging with rage, they closed in on me, howling madly all the while, intending to tear me apart. Their scrawny bodies were gaunt and nearly hairless. Their unearthly din petrified me. With foaming mouths and fangs dripping venom, they pressed in on me. To prevent an attack from behind, I pressed my back against a house, and in the darkness I prayed, "What shall I do?" Then, as if shaken from a trance, I remembered the walking stick that Ram Sevak Swami had given me. Wildly, I began to swing it back and forth. The horde fell back into a semicircle around me, only a few feet away. As each frenzied dog lunged forward, I whacked its snout with the Swami's stick. With the full force of my skinny arms, I struck. Growling ferociously, yet another predator leapt at me. I whacked him as hard as I could. Each of my attackers when being beaten back by the stick would fall back only momentarily, and then, unfazed, leap to attack again. Howls filled the night. Again and again the pack surged toward me, and again I managed to smack them down. But the more I fought, the more they escalated the siege. They could smell my flesh and blood. They could sense my exhaustion. There was no time to think. Every second I had to swing that stick with all my might. If even one dog were to get through, the horde would descend and instantly devour me. Was this to be my fate? To end as dog food? My strength was waning. Sensing imminent victory, their snarling became more fierce and deafening. They closed in for the kill, so tightly now I nearly blacked out from the stench of their breath. Feverish, despairing, I helplessly prayed for mercy. I felt utterly alone and on the verge of being killed. Just then, glancing over my shoulder, I noticed a closed door behind me. Was it locked? A single ray of hope broke through my nightmare. I quickly swung my shoulder around, twisted the knob, and pushed. The door gave way. I dove inside and slammed it shut behind me. Outside, the dogs vented their indignation by hurling their bodies against the door. Inside, it was pitch dark. Suddenly, a lantern flared up, revealing a family together on the floor, roused from their sleep. The men of the house, thinking me to be a burglar, sprang to their feet, demanding to know who I was. But I couldn't speak their language. Lifting a sword, a man charged toward me. What could I do but sink to my knees and with joined palms beg for mercy? When the host saw my supplications, he softened, and with arms stretched, pointed his finger to the door, demanding that I leave at once. But hearing the ferocious screams of the dogs, he paused and understood that for me to go outside would mean death. Still, he was apprehensive about this late-night intruder, and he stared long and hard into my eyes as if groping to size up my character and intentions. With only my expression, I pleaded for him to give me shelter. Somehow, my silent plea reached him. He placed down his sword and offered me a seat. From this moment, he began to see me in a new light, accepting me as a sadhu who had come under extraordinary circumstances to bless his home. The other residents followed his lead and prepared for me fruit and hot sweetened milk, which I gratefully accepted. I spent the rest of the night as their guest, listening to the pack of hungry dogs barking outside the door until dawn, their fury unabated. I had once heard an old analogy from the American Indians, and it came to my mind now. Within every heart dwell two dogs, a bad dog and a good dog, both at battle with one another. The bad dog represents our debased tendencies of envy, anger, lust, greed, arrogance, and illusion. The good dog, our divine nature, is represented by forgiveness, compassion, self-control, generosity, humility, and wisdom. Whichever dog we feed the most through the choices we make and the utilization of our time will empower that dog to bark the loudest and conquer the other. Virtue is to starve the bad dog and feed the good dog. The pack of bad dogs that attacked me tonight, foaming at the mouth with the lust to devour me, was a graphic visualization of what I was up against in my internal journey. As I lay there in relief, my thoughts flowed gratefully to Ram Sevak Swami. If he had not given me that stick, I would surely have died tonight. I recalled his words, prophetic and true. The stick of a devotee's mercy can save one from the greatest dangers. The next morning, when quiet prevailed and the dogs scattered for the day, I thanked my hosts profusely and left to visit a temple of Lord Vishnu. Here I heard a group of sadhus praising Janakpur, a holy place in the plains of Nepal where Sita, the consort of Lord Rama, appeared on earth. Their words invoked my spirit of adventure, and at once I departed. From Kathmandu I found passage on a rickety bus destined for Janakpur. Hours passed. The bus descended the Himalayan mountains and crossed the plains into a dense jungle where I saw a wild rhinoceros grazing on the foliage. Arriving in Janakpur, I first visited Bihar Kund, a small lake in an open, quiet area surrounded by old trees, quaint shrines, and an ashram where I was brought before the Guru, Sri Vedji. He was an aged sadhu with white stubble covering his jaw and head. He was overwhelmingly kind and begged me to reside in his ashram with free meals of rice and dal each day. Sri Vedji explained to me why Janakpur was a holy place. Known in the scriptures as Mithila, its glory sung in the spiritual epic Ramayana. King Janak, in preparation for a religious site, was plowing the soil here when out from the earth the goddess Sita appeared right under his plow. She became known as Janaki, the daughter of King Janak. Mithila was the first meeting place of Sita and Rama, and the place where Rama broke the mighty bow of Shiva to win the hand of Sita in marriage. By this time in my travels, the stories of God's incarnations on earth had become completely real to me. Seeing how enthralled I was, the kind Sri Vedji presented me with English translations of two Indian classics, the Ramayana by Valmiki and Ramcharitamanas by Tulsidas. They were thick volumes, and every morning I rose, bathed in a nearby lake, performed my meditation, and began my study, reading from sunrise until sunset. I found the Ramayana packed with adventure, romance, tragedy, heroism, horror, humor, and war. But there was more to it than this. All these elements harmonized in a spirit of devotion to awaken the love of God in the heart of the reader. When I volunteered to do some chores, Sri Vedji just smiled and said, "Your reading and accepting our food is purifying my heart. What greater service can I ask for?" On an early afternoon, I sat on the main road, a dusty path, and did not see a single car or truck pass all day. This was not surprising, since giant Nepalese elephants were the common form of transport in Janakpur. On the back of each elephant, a large cargo box was secured by a rope extending around its belly. The driver, typically a small boy, sat on the elephant's neck, just behind the head, and held a stick. A heavy brass bell hung from the elephant's neck, clanging as it swung from side to side. Each elephant moved with a regal, confident gait. Elephant after elephant passed in this way, along with oxen and water buffalo pulling overloaded carts. Women strolled past carrying either baskets or earthen pots on the top of their heads, often balancing the load without their hands. Even small girls effortlessly carried big loads in this way, maintaining perfect posture. As these girls carried their loads, they blissfully sang together the glories of Sita and Rama. The peaceful life these people lived soothed my heart. I prayed that Janakpur would never change. Near a sacred lake in the heart of Janakpur sat many temples. Two of these temples were prominent, Janaki Mandir and Rama Mandir. One day in the court of Ram Mandir, I came upon a sadhu in his 50s, sitting on a raised platform beside the temple. With his long matted hair, beard, and mendicant's robes, he appeared peaceful and holy. Hundreds of people stood in line to receive his blessings. When they reached the front, he graciously blessed them with his open palm. Desiring his holy blessing, I too joined the line and approached him, bowing down like all the others. Surprised to see me, he motioned for me to sit beside him on the platform. I felt especially privileged. While continuing to bless one admirer after the next, he inquired of me, "Where do you come from?" "America." "Why have you come from your rich country to the poverty of India?" "In search of God." He smiled at an old woman who lowered her head beneath his beneficent hand. "Why have you become a sadhu?" he asked through his smile. "To seek enlightenment," I said. Hearing my words, his expression grew sour. His smile melted into a frown and his voice became ugly. Shocked by this reversal, I did not know what to expect. "You are a fool," he hissed. "You are simply a fool. Do you hear me? A fool, an ignorant fool." I knew that I was a fool. Perhaps he wished to enlighten me. I inquired submissively, "Your Holiness, please instruct me how I can improve." Flying into a tantrum, he screamed, "I have been living as a sadhu for 30 years. Do you know what I have attained? Nothing. In all my years as a sadhu, all I've gotten is some rotten rice and dal." A woman stretched forth an infant to receive his blessing. "America is a land of riches," he shouted at me while blessing the child with his palm. "America has the most beautiful women to enjoy. America has big, comfortable houses and automobiles. America has fine clothes, food, and drink. America has the best movies and television." He closed his eyes and sighed, Oh, how I long for the pleasures of America." His eyes blazed now upon me. "But you have given it all up, and for what? Rice and dal. I'm sick of rice and dal. You have come to this miserable place of poverty to search for God. You are a fool. There is no God. Do you hear me? There is no God. Go back to your great land to enjoy. If you don't obey me, you will lead a despicable life and be cursed with the misery." As he spewed forth these words, hundreds of his admirers were busily worshiping him. They did not understand a word of English. The whole while he chastised me, His open palm was blessing these innocent, God-fearing people. They were begging him for God's blessings while he was decrying God's existence. They honored him as an enlightened being while he was speaking of the miserable futility of his life. In a daze, I walked away. My mind struggled to understand what the Lord had just revealed to me. The man was right. America was a land of riches and comforts, but I had lost my interest in a merely comfortable life. Instead, I felt I was traveling a road that was at times easy and beautiful, at times hard, but all in search of a greater treasure than anything the material world had to offer. If this man wanted to enjoy material life, why didn't he get a job and be honest? Instead, he posed as a saint to cheat the innocent. There is always the real and the counterfeit. Hypocrisy in religion has crippled people's faith throughout history. A holy person cannot always be recognized by external appearance. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that renunciation is not for a lazy man who does no work, but for one who works in a spirit of devotion. I thought of all the people I had been meeting who lived their lives working in the spirit of devotion, and I prayed that I could be one of them. I remembered the words I had heard Srila Prabhupada speak in Bombay. Better to be a sincere sweeper of the street than a charlatan meditator. Then I thought about that poor man pretending to be a sadhu. His bad dog is barking loudly, and he's daily feeding it enormous portions of rice and dal. Chapter 7. One day in Janakpur, while sitting alone on the edge of a still lake in the early morning dawn, a peculiar-looking sadhu sat down beside me. His opening words were startling. "Beware, there are scorpions in the guise of butterflies." Shaken, I asked why he was saying this. He stared at me intently and spoke again. "Don't open yourself up to demons in the guise of holy men, or you may discover your life in ruins only when it's too late." "What are you talking about?" I asked, alarmed. "Perhaps I'll tell you another time." Abruptly changing the subject, he introduced himself as Vasudeva and invited me to travel with him to a special historical place. I consented. A handsome man in his early 30s, Vasudeva had the manners of an aristocrat, and his speech rang with the distinction of the Queen's English. He wore white robes which, curiously, were immaculately clean. His long, jet-black hair was neatly combed. In all my travels, I had never met such a well-groomed mendicant. He was learned in both spiritual and material subjects, and like many I had met in those parts, was a devotee of Rama. When my new friend invited me to travel by foot for 3 days to reach an obscure holy place, I agreed. We journeyed through countryside the whole day, each day receiving one of my favorite foods, some rice and dal, through begging. Whomever we met along the way was charmed by Vasudev's gentle nature. Vasudeva insisted on doing all the cooking in an open field or forest, finding 2 rocks to form a stove and balancing the pot between them while I collected wood for the fire. He prepared the rice and dal with the finesse of an artist sculpting a masterpiece. As we walked along on pilgrimage, we discussed many subjects. Vasudeva seemed to know about everything. But something puzzled me. Behind a mask of cheerfulness, I sensed that this man was tormented. Yet he strained to hide his suffering and hold back his tears. And my affection for and curiosity about him grew. Strangely, one night, while we were traveling together, sleeping in a cowshed to escape the rain, I had a horrible nightmare of being attacked by ghostly beings. I wondered, why? After 3 days, we reached our destination, a historical rock in an abandoned field. That evening, as the wind began to gust, we could taste and smell the humidity rising and knew that the monsoons were brewing an imminent downpour. We searched around for a shelter and found a small stone structure abandoned long ago. We entered and flushed out several bats that were hanging from the ceiling. They hastily flapped outside. The house consisted of nothing more than 1 room, about 10 feet by 10 feet, with 2 openings for what were once a window and a door. The walls were crumbling. Moss and cobwebs were the only furnishings. Once inside, we sat silently as thunder shook the earth. Winds lashed the trees, and a torrential rain poured down. Vasudeva gazed at me through tear-filled eyes. He asked if he could pour out the storm in his heart. Honored that he would confide in me, I consented. Vasudeva shared with me that he had been born to a well-to-do family in Calcutta and received a PhD, becoming a popular, celebrated professor. Having met other devotees, he too became devoted to Rama at this time. "One day," he said, "2 distinguished persons visited my office, bringing gifts and food that they claimed were sent by their guru. After several such visits, they invited me to meet the guru. So I did. The guru knew everything about his life to the most private details and was able to read Vasudeva's mind. Astounded, he accepted the man's invitation to visit him regularly. I listened intently, fascinated as ever to learn the story of how a person comes to accept a guru. One day, Vasudeva continued, the guru revealed his mind. "I have been carefully examining you," he said. "You are young, popular, and intelligent. I need your help. I wish to initiate you into our rites." Vasudeva choked back a strong emotion as he recalled these words. I told him I would think about it. His voice trailed off, and he buried his head in his palms, as if trying to bury untold miseries from the past. In desperation, he looked at me. "Richard," he sighed, "I don't want to pollute your mind with my horrible story, but I'm going mad. I must tell someone. May I continue?" "Please do." He stared out the window hole. A lightning bolt highlighted the anguish of his face. Finally, full of despair, he spoke. I commenced to do research on this man, and to my horror discovered that he was the leader of a powerful sect, a master in the black tantric arts. His eyes now penetrated mine. Do you know about black tantrics, Richard? No, I admitted. Vasudev shuddered and his voice trembled. He explained that tantric mysticism was extremely powerful and could be either beneficial or sinister. There are the white tantrics who use their powers to serve humankind, he told me. Then there were the black tantrics who use their powers to exploit people's lives for their own diabolical purposes. They gain terrible influence through unspeakable sacrifices, tantric sex rites, and yoga. This guru was an extremely powerful black tantric endowed with the power to control people's minds and manipulate their lives. In my research, I was appalled to find that at the time of the rites of initiation, he seized control over that soul for many lifetimes to come. I never went back. But Vasudev, if you got free, why do you still tremble and quake to think of him? That was only the beginning, he went on. Daily the Guru's disciples harassed me in my office, in my home, or at any event I attended. I could not escape them. One day 5 of them barged into my office and surrounded my desk. I felt like a hostage. The next moment, the Guru stood before me to claim my soul. He warned me, "It is too late. I have claimed you as my own. Surrender to me, and I will award you the pleasures of fame and fortune beyond your belief. But if you refuse, I vow to torment you till death." Boiling over with disgust, I refused his command. Cursing me, his eyes blazed with vengeance, and he stormed out. Vasudev sighed. One evening, when I returned home to my widowed mother, I found that she had fallen into his trap. Shaking with anger, she scolded, "Why have you offended that religious man? You must become his disciple." I was shocked. I tried to explain his cruel machinations, but she would not listen. The Guru and his henchmen had effectively controlled her. After some day, she threw me out of my own house, saying she would not be party to my offenses. What was happening to my world? Then, under the sect's power, the president of my college fired me. Outside, lightning struck a tree and cracked off a huge limb, crashing it down on our rooftop. We sat speechless. An explosion of thunder that seemed to shake the universe followed the devastating lightning bolt. Vasudev paled. With a faltering voice, he continued, "Homeless and jobless, I was haunted by the Black Tantric's disciples wherever I went. They even influenced the police, who refused to protect me. What could I do but leave Calcutta? By his supernatural powers, this Black Tantric knew where I was at all time and dispatched his followers to harass me. Any job he landed, they convinced the employer to fire Vasudev, and any room he rented, they convinced the landlord to evict him. He even went to a newspaper to tell his story, but the reporters would not believe him. He said, "My life was in tatters." At that moment, a large toad hopped in through our doorway. His amphibious eyes gazed into mine. I wondered if he could be a secret agent of the Black Tantric and shuddered at the thought. Vasudev seemed to read my mind. "Are you sure you want me to continue?" he asked. Thunder rumbled in every corner of the sky. "I don't know anymore, Vasudev," I admitted. I was frightened, but it seemed important that I hear the story. "What happened after that?" Vasudev continued. "This evil yogi was incensed by my determination and resolved to murder me. With black rites and mantras, he created an invisible weapon that separates the soul from the body. In other words, it slays the victim. But the killing of the body is the least of it. In that interim period between life and death, the Black Tantric gains control of the subtle body covering the soul. As the sinister weapon struck, my body and mind were paralyzed with pain. I felt ghastly beings in ethereal forms haunting me, begging to be saved. I chanted the name of God. As long as the name of God was in my mind, the invisible weapon could not end my life. For a full day and night, the weapon tormented me. I knew if I ceased to remember the name for a moment, I would meet a fate worse than death. I chanted ceaselessly. The weapon was powerless to kill me in the presence of God's name. If an evil tantric weapon cannot kill its victim, it must return to slay its sender. The Black Tantric was struck dead, killed by his creation. God's name had saved me. Hearing this spooky tale, a wave of shivers rushed my body from head to toe. I leaned forward to hear more. "This evil mystic still exists," Vasudev said. "He just doesn't have a gross body. Now he controls his disciples from the astral plane, dispatching them to wherever I hide to seek revenge. They hunt me down at all times. I cannot settle in any one place because within a matter of weeks, they terrorize me." The furious storm outside was beginning to subside. In the emerging silence, Vasudev sighed. "It is for this reason, contrary to my will and my nature, that I have become a homeless mendicant. I know that if I genuinely surrender to God, He will protect me. But until that day comes, I must run and hide in the guise of a holy man." Crickets began to sing. Vasudev looked deeply into my eyes. "I'm sorry to tell you all this. I've kept it to myself for years, but I had to speak to someone. Richard, I have no one to blame. It's ultimately my own doing." I couldn't understand how he could blame himself and asked him to explain. Modestly, he attributed his present troubles to his past life karma. He said, "I don't know what I've done to deserve my miserable lot in life, but I know that it's justified. And I know that if I sincerely pass this test and surrender to the Lord, He will deliver me." Vasudev's trembling hand now held mine as he made one last appeal. Because you are my dear friend, I must advise you to abandon me, lest you get implicated. If I don't see you in the morning, I will understand. My brother, as you search for your path, please be cautious. You are exposing yourself to powerful beings, and not all are holy. And please pray for me. We sat in silence. I could not speak a word. I knew from what I'd already observed in India that many gurus had strong powers, including the power to sway followers to do whatever they asked. I was more terrified of what my companion had revealed to me than I had been of the pack of rabid dogs. The dogs I had been at least able to see and fend off. But how does one fend off the invisible forces of evil that could attack an unsuspecting person trying to follow a spiritual path? Vasudeva then lay down on the dirt to sleep, with his arm as a pillow. But sleep was far from my mind. I gazed through the hole in the wall. There were stars emerging from the parting clouds, but no moon. Next to me, Vasudeva tossed anxiously in his sleep. I thought, am I willing to be implicated in the harrowing complexities of his life? The thought caused me to shiver. I can think of no other way to help him except to pray. That is all he asked of me. As he tossed, turned, and groaned in his sleep, I walked far away into the night, praying that the path I was taking would be a safe one, and that he too might find safety and peace. My path continued to be rife with experiences both dark and light. Each experience offering me a window into the different worlds that might await me were I to take certain turns and not others. Most of the sadhus who greeted me upon my return to Janakpur were old enough to be my grandfathers. I was praying in the Janaki temple when, to my surprise, a young Nepalese student by the name Vishnu Prasad approached me. Well-dressed, with a round face and pious demeanor, he was so fascinated to see a Western youth who had taken to the life of a sadhu that he invited me to his home in the village of Brahmapur. His home there was like a beautiful ashram, the wealth of the family evident in bright furnishings, carpets, brass vessels, and flower gardens. As I entered, Vishnu's mother and father cordially greeted me and served me a sumptuous meal of spiced vegetables and aromatic sauces and rice glistening with clarified butter. I happily spent several days there. Uncles, aunts, and cousins all lived under one roof, but I never heard a single voice rise in anger. They had nothing but respect for one another. In the morning, the children respectfully touched the feet of their parents, and the parents, in turn, offered blessings. No matter what their age, the children, even the teenagers, were naturally obedient to their elders, and the younger children showed honor to the eldest son as the representative of the parents. Having been brought up in the 1960s America, I experienced this teenage respectfulness as a pleasant kind of culture shock. Moreover, Every inch of the house was immaculately clean, except me. I felt like a disheveled mendicant in a haven of class and refinement. My body looked quite beaten down, and taking note of this, the family gave me a medicinal balm for my bruised, cracked feet. Although they offered me my own room with a comfortable bed, I chose to sleep in the garden under an Ashoka tree. Each morning and evening, the family members would gather together for worship ceremonies in their small temple of Lord Rama in the center of the home, where during the day the women performed various devotions. I found nothing but happiness in their home. In the evenings, I sat with Vishnu Prasad in a pleasant garden among the marigolds, roses, and flower-bearing trees. Tara Prasad, his father, sometimes sat with us. A wealthy man with a wife and children, his purity of character was impressive, more so than many of the ascetics I had encountered. Spirituality is a matter of the heart, I pondered. The more I grew to love Vishnu Prasad's family members, the more of a friend he became to me. From these gentle souls, I learned much about the traditions of family life in the East. Most importantly, my realization that true spirituality comes in many forms was confirmed. However, I could not stay too long in these comfortable surroundings, for I had chosen the life of an ascetic. When it was time to go, the whole family saw me to the gate. They were crying as I turned and walked off down the brick path, and so was I. Now more than ever before, the path I was choosing struck me as strewn with unseen dangers. In my passion for truth, which admittedly I couldn't fully explain, I had left the comforts of home and continued to renounce comforts along the way, pressing on despite fears that arose at the uncertainties awaiting me. From Janakpur, I traveled back to Kathmandu Valley, just below the hill of Radhanath, 7 miles east of the city. In a grove of flowering trees, I meditated. Opening my eyes, I looked up into a magnificent rainbow arching over the entire Himalayan valley that glowed against an indigo backdrop of monsoon clouds. I took a deep breath, drinking in a breeze of cool, earthy air. Soon, stomping footsteps nudged me out of my dreamy state and drew my attention to a European tourist marching through the field and carrying a large bag of groceries. Well over 6 feet tall, blond, with muscles bulging from beneath his t-shirt, he had the physique of a bodybuilder. Suddenly, from out of the forest, a gang of brown monkeys surrounded him. Although each monkey was only a fraction of his size, they knew how to find his weakest point and attack. They snarled and bared their teeth, threatening him with intimidating gestures. While holding the groceries in one of his massive arms, he hoisted a sizable rock in the other, and whooping like a warrior, threatened to pulverize the little bandits. But the monkeys were unfazed and only snarled louder. They took small leaps toward their target, succeeding in attacking his mind. Paralyzed with fright, the Hulk could only tremble like a scared child. Finally, one of the little monkeys stalked right up to him and seized the grocery bag from his hands. He didn't even resist. While the monkeys clustered around the bag to devour the groceries, they paid no heed. Reduced to a bundle of nerves, the He-Man slipped away. Seconds later, a skinny little Nepalese boy of about 8 years old appeared on the scene. The gang of monkeys had just begun feasting on their booty, but stirred with apprehension upon seeing the tiny boy. The child skipped toward them with a stone in his hand. The gang of bandits screeched, terror in their eyes. Suddenly they abandoned the food and fled in all directions. The little boy collected up the groceries and sat down to dine. Meanwhile, the monkeys anxiously watched him from a distance. I was amazed. What had just happened? That playful boy was hardly the weight of one bicep of the Herculean European. The monkeys were unfazed by the threats of the giant because they sensed fear in his mind. But they feared the child because he had no fear of them. What did this mean for me and my ever-narrowing path to God? I thought of the pack of wild dogs and of Vasudev's frightening tale of evil black tantric. I considered my fear of coming under the spell of an unscrupulous guru were I to choose too hastily. But I could see how fear could block my progress. We are vulnerable to defeat when our minds succumb to fear. The foreigner was unfamiliar with monkeys, but the Nepalese Tat had lived around monkeys all his life. So we fear what we don't know. Through knowledge of our spiritual nature and sincere faith in God, we can overcome all fear. Please, Lord, bless me with such courage as I find my way to you. As I pondered these thoughts, the smiling boy ran right up to me and offered some bananas from the grocery bag. The monkeys chattered with excitement, marking me as a prospective victim. They made me realize that I had more in common with that European than I would like to think. Feeling I had a long way to go on my path to reach the innocent, fearless faith of this child, I politely declined. While wandering in the forests, I came upon Sitaram Baba, an extraordinary soul whom I fondly remember as the Standing Baba. A bearded man of 62 with large brown eyes and a rugged complexion, Sitaram Baba wore a simple one-piece pullover of burlap from neck to ankles. When I asked him why he wore only burlap, he replied that the coarse, itching texture of burlap kept him always in an uncomfortable condition. This, he said, helped him to always seek comfort in remembering Rama. Even more amazing to me were the wooden splints he kept tied around his ankles. Strange as his appearance was, he immediately treated me with the love of a father for a son. Like yogis I had met in the Himalayas, Sitaram Baba followed extreme vows, far beyond the vow of celibacy. He vowed to always stand on his feet and never sit or lay down. That is why he wore wooden splints around his ankles to support his body. For almost 50 years he had observed this penance. Along with his begging pot and prayer beads, he carried a rope and a wooden plank that he would hang from a tree branch like a swing. At night, he would lean on this and sleep standing up. He also followed vows to never sleep inside walls, and besides, being a vegetarian, never ate grains or beans. I witnessed the severity of this dietary vow. Wandering mendicants typically subsist on inexpensive foods that people give easily in charity. Foods such as rice, dal, or rotis, unleavened wheat bread, all of which contain grains or beans. We wandered together. Every day, Sitaram Baba would blissfully beg rice and dal for me, collect wood, and build a fire under an improvised stove made of rocks, all the while standing or squatting. When the food was cooked, he lovingly offered it to a picture of his beloved Lord Rama, with prayers and mantras, and then gave it all to me. But I was curious. What did he eat? During my stay with him, I never saw him eat anything more than a handful of cheap peanuts given to him while begging. That's all he could collect that wouldn't violate his diet. Yet he was so happy to take pains to feed me nicely. He would explain that to show love for God, one must affectionately serve his children. One day, when Sitaram Baba received a few vegetables while begging door to door, I was overjoyed. Finally, here was something for him to eat besides raw peanuts. My heart sank, though, when he served my meal, and I saw that he had cooked all of the vegetables into the rice and dal and kept nothing for himself. He was joyful. Fascinated, I scrutinized him, but I found nothing artificial about him. He was utterly sincere in his devotion. I once asked Baba, "Why do you follow such difficult vows?" Meekly he replied, "It helps me to be focused on my spiritual practices. But I am happy." And amazingly, he really was. Early one morning, before the light of day, I sat under a tree in the forest while contemplating this amazing person. I could not understand his strange vows. They seemed excessive and even unnecessary. But still, he had attracted my sincere love and trust. It is said that artificial austerity makes the heart hard. But his heart was soft and filled with humility, compassion, and devotion. Lord Jesus said, "You can judge a tree by its fruit." Although his appears to be a very strange tree, the ripened fruits are sweet. In Sitaram Baba's company, a question brewed in my mind. Most of the yogis I had encountered meditated on God as an impersonal force, while he and others meditated on the Lord as an all-loving person. Ram Sevak Swami served Lord Ram in such a personal way. Srila Prabhupada, too, expressed genuine love for Lord Krishna as an all-attractive person. Did this contradict the beliefs of those yogis who strove to merge their souls into a supreme impersonal oneness? Did it conflict with the practice of Buddhists who strove for a perfection of a qualityless nirvana? As a child, I had naturally prayed to God in a personal way, but as I studied philosophies, I found more and more leanings toward God being an all-pervading existence. While strolling together down a forest path one day, I inquired of Baba, is God ultimately impersonal or a person? Coming to an abrupt halt, his bushy brown eyebrows tightened and his face, marked with deep furrows of a rugged life, cringed. He sighed. How could our Lord have less personality and form than we have? He has everything without limit. He shook his head. This misunderstanding breaks my heart. His reaction struck me. I was becoming more aware of this fundamental disagreement over the ultimate nature of the Supreme Lord. Was he an impersonal, disembodied force, or was he the Supreme Person? In a way, it was the same question I'd asked myself as a child, trembling during thunderstorms. Who was God? Was he comforting like my parents, or as formless as the wind? I was wrestling to reconcile this philosophical issue and knew the answer would help me to choose my path. But I couldn't find the missing piece in the puzzle. I had been meeting wonderful souls who held both opposing views. Days later, as I left Sitaram Baba, I contemplated that how much one loves God is not something that can always be measured by looking at external forms. On one hand, I found holy people working jobs and raising families, and on the other, I found this eccentric hermit of the forest. But what they all had in common was their humility, a deep focus on spiritual practices, and an unquenchable thirst to serve. Chapter 8. I next roamed on to Swayambhunath, which lies 3 kilometers west of Kathmandu. Surrounded by a vast expanse of rice paddies, this beautiful hill is crowned with the Monkey Temple, an ancient Buddhist temple covered by a wide dome called a stupa and said to be built 2,000 years ago. The 8 eyes of Buddha on the base of the spire observed the 4 directions. These eyes were about to see something amazing. For no apparent reason, one morning I had an urge to walk to Kathmandu. So I left my reclusive abode on the mountain, wandered on foot to the city, and meandered through the streets and markets for a short time. Then I began to walk back to Swayambhunath through a long stretch of rice paddies, with its rich greenery and snowy Himalayan peaks piercing the sky. Kathmandu Valley is like a heaven on earth. As I walked along the narrow bank that enclosed the swampy paddy fields, tiny raindrops began to fall. Dark blue monsoon clouds thickened in the sky, obscuring the sun and promising to send down torrents. As the drizzle grew to a light rain, I looked around for a shelter, but saw not a single tree. Nothing but rice paddies stretched in all directions. Then, at a distance, I beheld the figure of what appeared to be an elderly man carrying an umbrella over his head. Hoping to share his umbrella, I scurried along the thin paddy border to catch up with him. The path was narrow and slippery, so I could not walk beside him. Instead, I nestled in behind. Struggling to keep under the umbrella, I repeatedly slipped down toward the soupy mud of the paddy. Meanwhile, the umbrella carrier never once turned around. Perhaps he was intimidated by my intrusion, or maybe he was concentrating on not falling into the pools of mud. In this anonymous way, we two strangers walked along together through the deserted and soggy fields for some time. Two men alone in a vast paddy field, we shared a single umbrella as the monsoon poured down torrents. 10 minutes later, when the storm subsided, I offered thanks to the stranger. He turned around now for the first time to have a look at my face. Our eyes met. We were thunderstruck. Our mouths dropped open and eyes filled with tears. How could this be? For a moment, we stood motionless in a place outside of time. The umbrella dropped into the mud. "Gary!" I cried. "Monk!" Under the monsoon sky, hearts bursting with joy, we embraced. "We're together again," I said. There we stood, alone in a vast Himalayan valley, thrilled by the mysteries of life. From the time of our sad farewell on the Isle of Crete, we had walked our respective paths. Inseparable childhood friends, we'd been separated by destiny, and today that invisible puppeteer had pulled us together in an isolated rice paddy in Nepal. Reeling with joy, we strolled through the paddy fields toward the place Gary was staying. All the while exchanging our experiences since parting. Slipping and sliding on the narrow paddy bank, Gary walked in front and I close behind. "Did you ever make it to Israel?" He turned to me and stroked his beard, which had grown several inches since we last parted 11 months before. "After you left Crete," he explained, "I worked on a fishing boat for my passage to Israel. I worked on a kibbutz for a while. Then with some money in my pocket, I set out for India." "How did you get here?" I asked. He replied, "I took the magic bus." He paused for a moment and began walking again. He described the cheap bus for down-and-out travelers that ran from Europe to India. After returning from Israel, he had boarded in Istanbul, crossed the Middle East, and got off at the end of the line in Old Delhi. "And what brought you to this uninhabited rice paddy?" I asked. "The sweltering heat of Delhi was too much," Gary told me, still trembling with excitement. "So with some friends from the magic bus, I came up to Kathmandu Valley and found a little house in the countryside. We approached the village and left behind the narrow borders of the rice paddies. I walked side by side with my old friend. A water buffalo trudged toward us on the sodden path, so we stepped aside to let her pass. "Monk," Gary continued, "I came to India with a hope to find you. But seeing the hundreds of millions of people in this vast land, I concluded it was impossible. I knew you would never be in the hangouts where travelers make the scene. I figured you were in some cave or secluded ashram. I never thought I'd see you again." Gary stopped and turned. His eyes widened, and he said, "Nobody will ever believe this story. Nobody." It was August of 1971. Almost a year had passed since we'd parted in Crete. By my appearance, Gary could see that I had adopted the life of a sadhu. The arduous journey across the Middle East, the time spent in the company of enlightened yogis, and the many months in seclusion had left me as a seasoned ascetic. For good reason, Gary was hesitant to bring me to the place he was crashing with his friends. What happens when a Nepalese village home is rented to hippies of the West? As we entered the little structure, rock and roll music blared, men and women danced seductively, and opium pipes were passed around in a cloud of smoke. Gary introduced me to his friends, all of whom I greeted politely. To say I could no longer identify with this scene was an understatement. I stood on the sidelines and watched. After some time, I took Gary aside, escorting him to a quiet place in an open field where we sat under a banana tree. A blanket of hovering clouds released a mist of cooling droplets. We breathed deeply the fresh mountain air, a welcome relief from the opium cloud inside. Although I feared being judgmental, I spoke openly to my friend. Gary, you have traveled across the world to come here. This is a land of spirituality. You have brought the hippie culture of the West with you. You could live like this in Chicago. You're just doing the same old things and more in a different setting. How will you grow? What will you gain? I pleaded with him in earnest. Please, brother, while you're in this part of the world, try to experience the wealth of spirituality here. If you agree, I'll take you to the holy places and teach you the life of a sadhu. Gary looked far into the horizon. Let me think about it. Come on, Gary, I pressed. Don't you remember when you begged me to go to Europe with you? I dropped all my plans and did it. Now I'm pleading with you to come to the holy places with me. I loved my friend, and it pained me to see that he came so far and was missing this precious opportunity. The next day, Gary said goodbye to his friends and entered into the school of spiritual mendicants. Together again, we began exploring the meaning of life by meeting new people in new places. But this time, we followed traditions that were long ago established by enlightened beings. Day by day, I taught my old friend how to survive in India as a spiritual seeker. How amazed he was to learn the method for hitchhiking in India, jumping into the window of a moving third-class train. I also shared with him the art of begging for simple food and dressing like a sadhu. An elderly Swami informed us about a pilgrimage to Amarnath, a famous cave situated high in the Himalayas of Kashmir. He said that any soul fortunate enough to complete the rigorous pilgrimage would be awarded great spiritual merit. Gary was ripe and ready for the adventure, and so was I. We set off. On the road again from Kathmandu, we returned to India, riding in the back of a truck to Raxaul and then on to Patna, where I introduced Gary to Ram Sevak Swami. Swami was thrilled to see me again and still carrying the stick he gave me. Gary looked on in wonder, amazed by the kind of friends I was keeping. From Patna, we traveled west by train. Gary was especially eager for a tour of Varanasi from a sadhu's perspective. While there, we visited the famous temple of Kashi Vishwanath in the early morning. Brass bells were ringing, hymns were chanted by the temple priests, and swirling pillars of incense smoke rose and dissipated into the air. I prayed, "My Lord, I long to know you and to love you. Please show me the path I must follow." Something happened to me at that moment. I was overwhelmed with a feeling of hope that if I only humble myself before the Lord, everything would be revealed. I felt that His hand was reaching out to me and that something very special was about to happen in my life. It was at the railway station in Varanasi that we squirmed into a train of compressed human bodies, crushed limb to limb in the sweltering heat of the monsoon. The whistle blew as the steam engine pumped up bellows of smoke and hissed out steam. The heavy steel wheels ground forward. The train lurched, and we were on our way. The monsoon storm was furious, converting an agricultural field into a muddy lake and paralyzing the engine. Hours passed in stagnancy. In the extreme heat, striving to set aside my physical discomfort, I longed to hear the whistle blow, signaling movement. Nearly 2 days later, the train inched out of the fields, and before dawn, halted at an unknown station. Gary and I escaped through a window and onto the platform for temporary relief before the journey continued. The fresh air was glorious. The dimly lit, crowded railway platform looked dirty and run down. To us, though, it was like a paradise, a place where we might find water to drink, air to breathe, and space to move our limbs. But while we were stretching, the whistle blew, the steam hissed, and the train jerked forward. Frantically, we ran alongside the train to jam our bodies back in through one of the windows, but couldn't penetrate the masses inside. Window after window and door after door, we tried to claw our way in. Finally, the train disappeared down the tracks, leaving us behind. We stood there, stranded in an unknown place, not knowing how long it might be until another train came through. Gary looked at me and asked, "Now what?" Chapter 9. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and dawn was just emerging. Not knowing where to go or what to do, I stood with my friend on a railway platform, which bustled with crowds who came off the train and hundreds who wrestled to get on. Amid it all, a strange comfort arose in my heart. It was similar to that feeling I had while praying in the temple of Kashi Vishwanath, a feeling that something special was about to happen in my life. There appeared to be a jovial mood in the crowd. Gary and I looked at each other, and remembering the flower that had determined our route through Europe, decided to stay put for the time being. After some time, the station became quiet. I saw some sadhus sitting some distance ahead in a circle on the platform. I gestured to Gary to wait, and I approached them. "Excuse me," I inquired. "Where are we?" Saying nothing, a sadhu stared up into my eyes as if he had been waiting for me. Rising to his feet, he broke the silence. "This is Mathura, Lord Krishna's birthplace, and today is Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday." On their invitation, Gary and I walked with them to the place where the Janmashtami festival was being celebrated. As we approached the main gate, one elderly sadhu turned to me. "Do you know about Lord Krishna?" "Not very much," I admitted. I knew little more than he was the blue boy in my picture, that his name appeared in the mantra Mother Ganges had let me hear, and the story of how he broke the clay pot and fed butter to monkeys as a child. "Could you tell me more?" I asked. His face lit up with enthusiasm as he repeatedly rubbed his beard and began. "Krishna is our name for the one God of creation. He is without beginning or end, unborn and undying. The Lord resides in his supreme abode. But by his sweet will, he has taken birth in this world many times and in many forms throughout human history, all to show us the way out of suffering and into spiritual happiness." The sadhu pointed into a huge courtyard, teeming with throngs of pilgrims. "In this spot," he said, "Lord Krishna first appeared on earth 5,000 years ago. Come, please join us in this celebration." What I saw inside spurred my curiosity. A massive mosque towered over a tiny underground temple for Krishna. "Is there some reason there is a mosque at Krishna's birthplace?" I asked our self-appointed guide. Previously, this was the site of the Adi Keshava temple, one of the greatest monuments in the world. But in the 17th century, the Mughal emperor Aurangzeb destroyed it and built a mosque in its place. "Why?" Gary asked. The sadhu shrugged his shoulders to convey his helplessness. I suppose this was his way of showing the superiority of his religion and his power over the subjugated Hindus. A hopeful smile crept back onto his face. "But there is a plan to build a majestic temple for Lord Krishna just beside the mosque. Soon it will rise. Anyhow, this place is sacred regardless of what man does to it. Now let us go in and celebrate." The mood inside the courtyard was indeed one of celebration. Thousands of worshippers stood in line to enter the small underground temple of Lord Krishna, and legions more gathered above. In every direction, people were celebrating. Hundreds danced and chanted to live music played with drums, flutes, and cymbals. Elderly scholars claimed their places and lectured to their followers, and on a makeshift stage decorated with bright-colored cloth, strings of flowers, and painted backdrops, stage actors in extravagant costumes relived the story of Krishna's advent. Meanwhile, priests poured oblations of clarified butter into a sacred fire while chanting mantras from the Vedas, or ancient Sanskrit holy books. Smiling and singing, devotees tossed colored powders on one another as they roamed about from one event to another. We even saw Hindus with clay markings on their foreheads and bearded Muslims wearing their traditional caps, laughing and dancing together, absorbed in the festivities. The recluses celebrated too, sitting on the sidelines, softly chanting and fingering their prayer beads. During the festivities, lectures, songs, or conversations, I frequently heard devotees say the word Vrindavan. I could sense how dear this place called Vrindavan was to them. We spent all day absorbing the wonderful sights and sounds of the birthday celebration. As midnight approached, swarms of people streamed through the lanes that led to the Yamuna River, crowding into the Dwarkadish temple near its banks. According to the scriptures, it was at midnight that Lord Krishna appeared in the city of Mathura. Now everybody waited for that moment. Although the temple was already packed with thousands, a steady flow of thousands more managed to stream through the door. The police tried to control the crowds in vain with long bamboo sticks. Neither Gary nor I had ever seen such massive crowds. To get a better view, we climbed up 2 pillars in the temple hall and looked down upon this astonishing scene. We scanned the multitude, which vibrated in anticipation. When the clock struck midnight, the doors of the inner sanctum swung open to reveal the altar of Krishna. A tumult of joy rose like a tidal wave. Enthralled, the people in the crowd were oblivious to being shoved and crushed. Old and young, male and female, rich and poor, all merged together with palms joined in prayer and eyes glossed with devotion. Small circles of villagers sang their own special songs, while everyone else laughed, cried, danced, and exuberantly called out Krishna's holy names. For Gary and me, clinging to our pillars, the eagerness of these pilgrims was astounding. At about 3 a.m, we found a place to sleep on the bank of the river Yamuna. We were told that this particular place, Vishramghat, was where Krishna personally took rest on occasion. The next day, as we strolled through the lanes of Mathura, 4 well-dressed young men rushed out from a tea stall to greet us. "We are proud to see foreigners in our city," the leader said. "Would you care to meet our revered Guru?" "Sure," Gary replied. "We'd love to meet him." "Come, my friends," the man said, leading us back into the tea stall. "Long ago, our Guru renounced the pleasures of this world to realize the highest truth. Guruji is a scholar who can answer any query you may have. We are among hundreds of his faithful disciples in this area. Excuse me while I go and call on him." Minutes later, the Guru appeared. He was a man of 40 or so, with a shaved head. His movements were meticulous. Speaking refined English, he articulated for us in a pleasing accent the scriptural importance of Mathura city. To our joy, he invited us to spend our nights at his temple. We followed him into a small temple honoring Lord Shiva. In the middle was a Shiva lingam. Just behind it, an iron trident planted upright in the ashes of a sacred fire pit. The Swami carefully saw to our needs, bringing us a vegetarian dinner and answering whatever questions we asked. When night set in, the Swami offered Gary a straw mat on the floor to sleep and invited me to share his wooden bed. To sleep on the same level as this revered guru was an honor I did not deserve. I mused on how his many disciples would have given anything to be in my position that night. The Swami lay down beside me. Then, in the quiet of the night, I felt his hands massaging my body. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "This is our custom to show hospitality for guests." Not wanting to be ungrateful, I said nothing. Slowly his hands crept toward the private parts of my body. My mind swam in a whirlpool of apprehension. Confused, I pushed his hands away. After a few minutes, his hands snaked downward again. Again I pushed them away. Please do not massage me. I don't like this." He whispered into my ear, "I am giving you God's blessing. It is not me that is doing. I am simply God's instrument. You must not resist." The room was dark and hot. I lay there in anguish. What if I disappoint him? He might punish me. I thought of Vasudeva and his unfortunate experience with a corrupt guru. Or he may have yogic powers. Each time the man tried to grope me, I pushed his hands away. Was this really a custom for showing hospitality? His aggression increased with each failed attempt. Now he was panting with passion and becoming more forceful. He would not take no for an answer. Incited, I was on the verge of smashing him with my fists, but I restrained. How could I fight with a Swami? Is that what a sadhu should do? And what would his disciples do to me if I did? Perspiring profusely in the sweltering humidity of the monsoons, I lay there and prayed to be saved from this horrible situation. Then I made up my mind. Shoving him away, I jumped to my feet. Infuriated, he embraced me tightly, but I wriggled my way out, pushed him away, and fled. Gary, meanwhile, slept peacefully through the whole ordeal. I rushed into a deserted lane in the late night and was free. From a safe distance, I spied on the Swami through the open entranceway, making sure he did not offer any of his hospitality to Gary. Like a watchdog, I stood guard, ready to come to Gary's aid if required. Standing in the shadows of night, drenched by a monsoon downpour, I remained awake until dawn. In every spiritual path, there are those who are true and those who are false. Saintliness is not determined by one's title, dress, hairstyle, or place of residence. This man, for example, had the title of Swami, a shaved head indicating he had renounced worldly pleasures, and the robes of a sadhu. He was a scholar of scripture, the high priest of a temple, and the guru of many disciples who revered him. Yet he tried to exploit me to satisfy his own carnal desire. Real saintliness should be understood by a person's behavior. Exerting one's spiritual authority to exploit the innocent is a grave injustice. I prayed that this incident would not create doubt in my mind toward the sincere devotees. Gary continued to sleep peacefully through the night without incident. oblivious to the storm that raged both inside and outside the temple of Shiva. In the morning, Gary was shocked to hear my description of what had happened. A guru ravaged by lust? Our idealistic innocence was once again challenged by the real world. Despite having been stranded in Mathura, we were still determined to make our pilgrimage to Amarnath in the Himalayas. But that day, while taking my morning bath in the Yamuna River, I felt an intense pulling to visit the nearby village of Vrindavan everyone had been talking about. For reasons I could not explain, I longed to go to Vrindavan alone, as a solitary pilgrim. Gary agreed to meet me there the next day, at which time we planned to resume our journey to Amarnath.